Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and we are live at MyWorldPod.com. And you could have joined us had you gone to MyWorldPod.com, hit the subscribe button, and turn on the notifications bell. That way you'd be live on a Sunday morning with the Hall of Famer, the greatest professional wrestler of all time. Ladies and gentlemen, your friend and mine, Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Oh, slappy 4th of July weekend, my man. How are we doing? It is a sunny Sunday morning. This is the 8 a.m. Central Time. So our friends across the pond over in the UK, get them a tea time edition, or a little earlier than that. But excited to be here as we are recording this. This is Sunday morning, less than a week away from All In. We got a lot going on. I'm headed up to Springfield, Illinois today. That's one of the reasons we're recording a day early. All good, though. Prospect League, the All-Star Game festivities, home run derbies tomorrow, all that kind of stuff. The game on Tuesday. We got a big luncheon deal, Conrad, but I appreciate you accommodating the schedule today. Anyhow, did you have a good 4th of July? Did you grill some burgers? We had fireworks around here. I don't know if anybody follows me on Instagram. I tried to put a few things up there. Boy, oh boy, we had a fireworks show around here. Good food, lake time, all that kind of good stuff. But we got us a good topic today. Good morning, Coach Rosie. Hope all's well out in morning, Coach Keith. Hope everybody's doing well. We got us a crowd that joined us here. So, Connie, did you have a good 4th?
I did, yes, sir. Went over to Mom and Dad's. Dad threw some ribeyes on the big green egg, and Mom made some homemade peach ice cream. So I was a happy fat boy. And, this is only my second year doing 4th of July at the lake. And I think last 4th of July I was actually at the beach, so I didn't get to do it here.
Okay.
But, man, I got to tell you, my neighbors, I got a neighbor like 3 doors down. Jeff, I'm not kidding. He probably spent $15,000 in fireworks.
Hey,
it's unbelievable. I'm like, what?
Right out in the middle of the water, they were, oh gosh, I mean, all around, boats just sitting up. I'm like, they ain't got to go downtown. I don't know if you got a glimpse, but
350,000 people in downtown Nashville for the fireworks display. 350,000 people, Jeff. I mean, I can't imagine driving to one of the most expensive markets in the country or flying there. I mean, I don't know if you've priced staying in a nice hotel in downtown Nashville, but it's up there with Manhattan and has been for a few years.
It's ridiculous.
And we're going to do that in order to see fireworks. 350,000 people looking for an excuse for country music, booze, and fireworks, Jeff.
Connie, I got to watch it from the comfort of my couch. But we shot our fireworks off, and it was almost perfect timing. We got done about 9:30 here at the house, and that's when Nashville fired up. And I was cleaning up. I was doing just kind of some honey-do list as the day came to a close. Conrad, those fireworks had to have gone on for like 40. Like you just said, your neighbor spent 15, and there was some folks around the water here that I don't know what they spent, but it was a lot because they went on and big and loud. And the city of Hendersonville, we do ours out here not to compete with downtown. We do ours every year on July 3rd, and it's pretty damn spectacular. But my God, I'd love to see that pyro bill for downtown Nashville because it went on and the drones. That was a spectacular. But damn, 350. Ooh, Nashville ain't the little town I grew up in, pal. That's for damn sure.
Well, we are excited that you guys are spending Sunday morning with us. We hope that if you haven't already, you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell at MyWorldPod.com. We want you to be live with us. If you've got a question for Jeff, keep them coming this morning. We are going to be soliciting your questions here. We're also going to be talking about what's happening this weekend. Jeff, we're just a few days away from arguably one of the biggest wrestling weekends of the year. I don't even think it's arguable. Yeah, it's a fact. Goldberg's last match is this Saturday on Saturday night's main event. Now, they've not called it Goldberg's last match, so maybe it's not. But it's in Atlanta where Goldberg is challenging for what I guess WWE is referring to as the Big Gold Belt. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about All In, but we're going to do that at the end of the show.
Oh, okay.
So instead, we're going to talk about our topic today, switching things up a little bit, and we're going to go back 20 years to talk about Hard Justice 2005. And if you go back to, we'll call it early May 2005, this is when we started to see some of the coverage about the loss of Chris Candido. What a talented performer, gone way too soon. Some of our listeners are probably familiar with his work, whether it was in Smoky Mountain or it was a part of the tag team, the Body Donnas and the WWF, or maybe most famously his ECW run. But I do know that he's here in TNA after he's had some challenges in his life, and it feels like he's on the right track. And I think he was getting a lot of praise. Obviously, his role in wrestling had changed a little bit. His body had changed a little bit. But I want to know from your perspective what you can tell us about Chris Candido when you worked with him here in TNA. And for those who don't know the story, some of the details that unfortunately led to the end of his life.
Yeah. To give it a little set point, as you said, it's hard for me to wrap my head around in a lot of ways. We're going, we do it often. Go back 20 years, Hard Justice, 2005, and we're going to build to it, and we're going to get to it. But Tito Ortiz and where the UFC was at, and just kind of where the wrestling business was at, it was just, man, oh man, me and AJ Styles. And I want to look up because I want to jog my memory. I was in Mexico the night before. These are the Fox Sports net days. And, Chris, a guy that came to the Tennessee territory, him and Tammy, gosh, they were right out of high school, super, super young. And even at a young age, Chris could go out on, Memphis TV or Around the Loop, whatever, and have you a heck of a solid, because he was just getting started, a solid basic match. And then, as time went on and his career, ECW and WWF and just Sonny and all that kind of stuff. But then Chris coming back, and like you said, he had his ups and downs, but I guess you could say his this may be too big a word, but kind of his aura. Chris knew what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and teaming him with the Naturals, it was just one of those things that it fit really right out of the gate with those guys, because Andy and Chase, great. They always had great chemistry together and a good team, but their verbal skills were in the early stages. So anyway, putting them together, and then I don't know where you want to get too far into this, but Chris and the broken leg, and it was.
So let's talk about that. So he suffers a broken leg. It happens on a TNA show.
Yeah,
and obviously it's not the plan. He's playing like I guess you'd call it a tweener manager character.
Yep.
So on the one hand, he's got his guy's best interest in mind, but on the other hand, you have to sort of question, hey, what's really going on? And so he suffers the leg injury, and it is a leg break. And now he's going to be on a cast and making appearances, but still trying to be a part of the program. And I think it may have even been his idea to act like, hey, I broke my leg because it was karma for my behavior for the past few weeks. So we're trying to turn even this bad break into a story. But then, of course, we've got to fly home. And I think that's where he got himself in trouble. We've talked about this a little bit with Bruce Pritchard, and Bruce said he didn't take the injury seriously enough to think about the injury. If he flew home, he probably didn't keep his leg elevated. I don't think Chris even really gave much thought that he had a broken leg. And of course, we know what unfortunately is going to happen, I believe, is that he suffers a blood clot and passes away. Is that the way you remember it going down? And how do you remember hearing that news, Jeff, that Chris was no longer with us?
Phone call. I can't remember who, but I just can remember it was such a shocking thing. And, when you around a guy, look the guy in the eye and kind of understand at the very core of it, and I say this as how, times have radically changed as it relates to medical and kind of, I guess you could say, the power that they have. Maybe more importantly, how the guys are much more in tune with it and listening to it. But Chris was proudly, and I don't want to just say, old school wrestling, just kind of an old school mentality, or our prior generations that, hey man, I've got a job and I'm going to do it well, broke leg or not, I'm going to get it done. My mouth's not broke, so I can still talk. Okay, I've got this broken leg. I can kind of work through the pain. Part of my job description is to get on a plane and fly from Philly to Orlando or whatever airport, Jersey, back and forth. And so he didn't really, and I don't want to say sell it, but he didn't give it a second thought. And I think to all of our downfall, none of us really gave it a second thought. Okay, he's got a broken leg. He's willing to fly. Let's fly. Obviously, it was a fatal mistake.
There's a lot of hard feelings. Obviously, there's a lot of shock. I mean, most people, I don't mean to overstate this, but I feel like by and large, Candido at this point was probably universally well liked. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. To me, one of those guys. So now we're 10, 12 years into his career. He had earned his stripes in so many ways and really succeeded when maybe I'll call it creative or life or timing or circumstances have kind of delivered him some lemons. And Chris always kind of found a way for him to squeeze out some lemonade. And I think not just, and I think this is what you're meaning, not just the fan base, but the talent and the boys as well. Yes, Chris had kind of earned his stripes because he loved freaking, you knew it 2 minutes after you were talking to the guy. He loved the business, and you can't help but love that kind of infectious passion.
This is crazy, but he passes away just a few days after his 33rd birthday.
Unbelievable.
So young. It's so crazy. But even crazier than that is, I think you just freestyled. Hey, he's about 12 years into his career. He was 19 years in. He actually started wrestling when he was 14. We got a little Kerry Morton in him right here.
Good Lord.
Or maybe Kerry has some Candido in him. Either way, I appreciated Chris's work, and it feels like, even though he had some substance issues and it felt like he was on the right track, I felt like everyone was rooting for him, Jeff. He's one of those that everybody, it feels like he was the epitome of the underdog you could pull for.
Chris was in, and you could mark it. He wasn't in TNA that long, but here's kind of a unique testament at his funeral, Conrad. As it was lots of people showed up, and I think it was a testament to how well he was beloved. The Carters came, lots of talent, obviously people from all kind of days of his career. And that was just kind of what to double down on. His infectious passion for wrestling just shined through and through. And that was, God almighty, 33 years. I knew he was young. That's one of those stats I probably don't like to remember.
Well, there's no doubt about that. You mentioned he wasn't there very long. You're exactly right. He started with TNA in January of 2005.
Wow.
It's locked down April 24th, 2005, where Candido suffers that injury. And it's a steel cage match with Lance Hoyt, Apollo, and Sonny Siaki. The very next day, he's going to have surgery to have titanium plates and screws inserted into his leg. He would even say on TV, 33 screws. Now, I say TV because he's immediately on a television taping. But as a reminder, the pay-per-view where he's injured is April 24th. On April 28th is when he falls ill and goes to the hospital. He's rushed to the hospital. There he's diagnosed with pneumonia, but it's too late. He's gone. It was actually a blood clot that we were all under the impression of at the very beginning, but it turns out it was actually acute pneumonia brought on by a surgery. That's according to his brother Johnny. But I know we all heard back then blood clot, and everybody said, "Hey, it's from flying." But I guess the autopsy that his brother revealed said no, it was actually acute pneumonia. No matter what it was, you had a guy who was gone way, way too soon. As a reminder, this is still very much the early years of TNA, so Chris Candido did not have a contract. Respectfully, it's not like WWE was looking to hire Chris anytime soon, so I'm sure you guys were just paying him on a per appearance deal. But I guess before his death, the company had agreed to pay for Candido's surgery. And I think the promotion, even in their contracts, says, hey, we only have to pay half. But this is a really nice thing for TNA. It feels like, hey, we're gonna pay for that. Now I bring this up because I know that Tammy had some real hurt feelings. I guess they were never officially wed, but most people thought of them as a couple. We're talking Tammy Sitch and Chris Candido. And she's done interviews years ago where she said that TNA sent her a ham. And I guess she was offended by that. Do you remember there being any controversy at the time about, or was there discussion about what are we doing? What should we be doing? Or was this just Tammy making noise? And we know that Tammy had her ups and downs in addiction. And did you just dismiss that? Or was there a real conversation about what should or shouldn't happen?
I heard way after the fact about the ham kind of tongue in cheek. But I know that Terry Taylor, he was running talent relations, I believe at this time. Yeah, Terry, because yes. And Dixie, they would be the ones that would like handle the day-to-day, I'll call it minutia of maybe Tammy coming around. But we dealt with Chris from Bob Carter on down. Everyone really liked Chris, but the ham story and all the, you just said it, battling the disease of addiction. Tammy is going to chirp, but it wasn't the first time, not going to be the last time. She had her own issues, but to my recollection, what does the note say, Conrad? Because I think, we'll get into a rabbit hole here, but that was Tammy. That was Tammy's version. There was a truth version. I think the better way to handle saying that.
What kind of ham was it, Jeff? Do you know?
Honey baked. No,
yeah, I mean, it's the only kind, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, serious business. I think you and I both agree. If you're a young wrestling fan, or maybe you were a Labs fan and you missed some of it, I want to encourage you to go watch some of Candido stuff.
Yeah,
he was a performer. He wasn't necessarily the biggest guy, but man, he filled his role. Like that feels like a guy you would want on your roster because you can use him in so many different places. Am I wrong on that?
So was it Skip? What was the name of his WWE?
Skip and Zip and as part of the Body Donis.
And look, I know the role they played. They weren't created to be this world beater tag team. They were sports entertainment in this era of the industry. To me, you got to watch a little bit of that. You got to watch a little bit of Chris and Smoky Mountain. Watch some ECW. I do. I think his work limited in TNA, but kind of showed even more diversity. And obviously that was the tragic end. But he is a guy that I believe, wasn't the tallest, wasn't the biggest, wasn't the fastest, wasn't the most athletic. But you just said it, 19 years. But I mean, he had an active living on top of battling his demons and his ups and downs and made a career out of it. And I say that to say, if you're an aspiring guy, don't model everything like all of us, take the good out of it. But man, there was a lot of good in Chris on how to craft a career.
Shout out to Chris Candido, gone way too soon. One of the very best. Hey, and you can make this your best season yet with nutritious 2-minute meals from Factor. Eating well has never been this easy. Just heat up and enjoy, giving you more time to do what you want. You can get outside instead of prepping and cooking indoors. Factor meals arrive fresh and ready to eat, perfect for any active lifestyle. And they've got 45 different weekly menu options where you can actually pick gourmet meals that fit your goals. You can choose from Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and more. Factor powers your day with satisfying breakfasts, on-the-go lunches, premium dinners, and guilt-free snacks and desserts. It's easy to savor more this spring. Factor meals pack in the flavor with none of the fuss. And don't take my word for it. Ask any professional wrestler. Jeff and I have talked about this a lot here on the program. Wrestlers these days are on a strict diet and they're traveling with a bag of food. You'd be surprised how many of those bags are filled with Factor because they make eating good and eating well easy. I mean, eating good because it tastes great, but eating well because it helps you accomplish those goals. Go get started right now at factormeals.com/myworld50off and use the code myworld50off. That'll get you 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code myworld50off at factormeals.com/myworld50off for 50% off plus free shipping. So, Jeff, let's talk a little bit about TV. There's a note in the Observer that says that you guys were really close to getting a new deal done with Fox Sports Net, and your contract is about to expire in just a few weeks, but I guess you guys got to an impasse. Supposedly, Fox Sports Net wanted a 6-month minimum contract, and it's written in the Observer that TNA was really looking for more of a month-to-month commitment. Now, you might hear that and say to yourself, why would a wrestling company not want a long-term contract? Aha. It's because allegedly WGN and Spike are somewhat interested in having a pro wrestling program. We know for a fact that Spike had seen success having Monday Night Raw and the UFC together, and now with the WWE back on USA, perhaps there was an opportunity there. Do you remember this sort of hokey pokey with FSN of, hey, we'd like to stay on, but not too long? You're muted, Jeff.
Sorry about that, pal. It's Sunday morning. I've got my coffee. I just ate a banana during the break. I was thinking about my Factor meals. I'm going to throw 2 in the car today. I got some car time. That's another little bonus. But anyhow, all right, Conrad, Fox Sports Net. I remember here's kind of the broad strokes that any organization, a network, loves to be paid, whether it's ad sales or time buy. And we were obviously paying for the first year to kind of work our way in there. When it came around to year 2, we knew that they liked our program, and we were like, we're not going to box ourselves into a year. Conrad, if I remember correctly, our first conversations wasn't about 6 months. They're like, no, we're going to, if you guys want this slot, it's a year renewal. And we said, that ain't flying for sure. So then I think they were the first to counter at 6 months, and I think we actually came back at 1 month. But knowing on our side, Conrad, that look, kind of the 90-day loop of getting in schedules and advertising and time slots and all that kind of stuff, we kind of had a feeling a 90-day is something we were going to kind of lock ourselves into. But it was a real interesting back and forth, and we're trying to get, re-airs and maybe even time slot kind of preferred positions, like we did the Best Damn Sports Show. We had I'll just say this, across the board, we had all kinds of discussions going on of where we were at as a company. But yeah, that was an interesting conversation because they liked it goes without saying, they didn't like just revenue. They liked the money. And again, people don't really understand this was just a completely different time. Like nowadays we see Fox Sports and FS1 has NASCAR and basketball and football and all kinds. Well, this was the genesis of the regional sports networks and what we now know as the general coast to coast FS1. But these are in the early days. They liked our programming.
I do want to ask you about Tito. Meltzer's sort of freestyling that if you are angling for a Spike deal, we know that Ken Shamrock and Tito Ortiz absolutely changed the UFC's fortune forever with UFC 40 Vendetta. That's their first real big successful pay-per-view under the Zuffa era. A lot of that was in large part because of the cross promotion that Tito and Ken received on their appearance on the Best Damn Sports Show period, which used to be a real ratings juggernaut for them. So it led to a lot of success for the UFC, and, the matchmakers and the brass, if you will, of UFC still had to know that Ken Shamrock and Tito Ortiz is money. That's the reason they ran those rematches back. But I'm saying all that to say there's speculation in the Observer that perhaps one of the reasons you're trying to do something with Tito is to see if you can create a Tito Ken Shamrock confrontation inside a TNA ring with the hope that that may appeal to Spike executives. Is that the angle, or is there something else?
Specifically just the Spike executives or just in general?
Well, in general, but knowing that Spike had UFC, if you're aiming to have your program on Spike where UFC is, I'm curious, is that part of the thinking? Like, hey, let's give them some bona fide stars that Spike knows that they wish they had in UFC, but for whatever reason, contract disputes or what have you, those talent are not working with UFC right now. So this could be perceived as being a lot of value for Spike.
Help me out, Conrad, because you were a diehard UFC fan during this time, I believe.
Yes.
When did the Ultimate Fighter start? 03, 04? It was definitely up and running, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It was up and running because
that's the reason it's on Spike. It started in 2005, and it's immediately.
So 2005 was year one. Okay, that's why here's what kind of jogged my memory. You said the first big angle or first big showdown, Tito. That was definitely what we all kind of looked at, and we got word. I actually think through a FS1, I'm not exactly sure who was the first person to turn this on, that Tito is a wrestling fan, would like to get involved. And yeah, I mean, you go back in this time, I don't think there was a bigger UFC star for him, the bleach blonde, the look, the bad boy from Huntington, and all that kind of stuff. So Conrad, we were trying to make noise, whether it's WGN, Spike, it didn't matter, FS1. At the end of the day, our goal was plain and simple. We want to start getting paid for our content, because when you look back and understand that it wasn't, we're talking 6, 7, 8, 9 years that, we're 05 here. Well, 10 years prior to that, the rights fees for Nitro, a red hot show, and Raw, not well as publicized, they just weren't astronomical numbers like they are today. So an upstart with all the Attitude Era kind of bad baggage, if you will, with getting sponsors, everything, we were scratching and clawing to get noticed with good content that people would pay for. And again, different time, different era, but getting a legitimate MMA star like Tito on our programming involved would turn heads no matter what network.
Now, part of the strategy here is you guys are paying for time on FSN, correct?
Correct.
And I know you probably don't remember exactly, but do you have an idea of how costly that was? Like what your time buy costs were? What were you paying FSN?
20 to 30.
20 to 30,000 a week?
I think.
Now, it's written in the Observer that you had sold 1 or 2 commercials to help barely offset some of that cost. Do you remember who your advertisers were in the very early days of Fox Sports, of FSN? Like, who were your early supporters?
I wish I could come up with even a BS answer. I ain't got a clue. I really don't. I know it was minimal, and this was something that I would get those kind of iggies or heads up that, I'll say Bob, but Dallas is like, yeah, this is kind of what you're talking about. We see it, because I was very clear with them that we are, from the day that they came on board, we're kind of fighting an uphill battle in the advertising and sponsorship game. But you look at the numbers today, UFC versus WWE, we've talked about that, just a radical difference in that wrestling. I think it's blowing through it, and Slim Jim tables and everything that goes with that. But it comes from that syndication era, going back to the, WCCW days and USWA, just the advertisers that are attracted to wrestling. It has been a challenge. We've come a long way, but we're talking 05, Conrad. So it was a challenge to get, I'll call it the big money in advertising.
I guess my question is, if you know that you're doing a time buy with FSN and maybe they're not willing to give you the type of renewal that you're looking for, and you're in conversations with WGN, but that is almost a plan C, or at least a plan B. Plan A is to be on Spike. But if there's an opportunity to get on Spike, there may be a pause, meaning there's a chance that you might not have a renewal from FSN. And as soon as the FSN show ends, immediately the Spike show starts. So the idea of coming off TV completely for a few months has to feel a little nerve wracking. I mean, I'm not saying necessarily you had a ton of momentum with you on FSN, but you had something.
Yep.
And if all of a sudden, as a fan at home, I'm used to watching whatever show it may be on a certain day a week at a certain time, and now it's not there for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Now we're, 6, 9, 8, 12 weeks later, and we don't have it. I think a lot of fans may think, oh, well, that show's over. How big of a threat or a concern was it to you that, hey, if we don't get this contract executed, we may not have TV at all anywhere?
Well, and I'd probably have to get out kind of a couple of different calendars, but as far as the most stressful time in TNA history, it is obviously the Scrooge situation probably is number one or right up there. Conrad, this may be 2 or 3 because there was a lot of unknowns because we damn sure didn't have a WGN deal inked and we didn't have Spike and we weren't real sure what the strategy was going to be with FS1. The Carters had, I've gone through that. They had given more than a full vote of confidence, but still just the unknown, what you're pointing out is, and here's the big thing that I don't even think, I was having a conversation with a young buddy of mine at the gym that, he's early 30s. So we're going back 20 years ago. Like he can't even wrap his head around trying to find out news. We were talking sports, any kind of information without going to X or Chat GPT. Like they can't even fathom that. So the messaging of just where we were at as a promotion, yes, the internet was going and you had websites and you had all that. You did, but it was not the age of completely instantaneous information that people followed. So Conrad, yes, we were all, it was tense because, it was pressure on the business. Like, what direction are we going to take? We knew we were going to take one, but, I just said it. Spike deal wasn't done. WGN deal wasn't done. And we weren't real sure if FS1 was going to play ball with us in the fact that we were not going to re-up for another complete year.
Let's talk a little bit about some backstage maneuvering. Dave loved talking about backstage politics here in TNA.
Clicks.
And I can't believe that this is what he wrote, but here's what he says. The big thing behind the scenes is a power struggle between the Jarretts and the Carters. The basic gist is the Carters have caught on that TNA was in reality a vehicle to make Jeff into a star. It hasn't worked, and the key is the Carters want Jeff out as champion, AJ Styles in. But Jeff doesn't want to do it, and Jerry is rallying people against it. Jeff has agreed after a lot of prodding to drop the title, but is trying to get it switched from Styles. Jarrett's suggestion was Monty Brown, because that would require a turn by Brown. The two are aligned right now in storyline, and that would be premature. Although at one point, the plan at Lockdown was to already have Brown turn because there was super heat on Rhodes for turning Brown heel in the first place. It would also require a new contract signing by Brown, and that may not happen. And if you have a chase build up, well, that will all buy Jeff Jarrett a ton of time. The office is similarly divided as most of the people who were hired by Jeff, but many are insistent that it happens now, and Styles is the wrestler who should be pushed as their biggest star. And I guess the hiring of Frank Dickerson seems to have sped up a process that was inevitable of the Carters now wanting to get the biggest decision-making power away from the Jarretts. The problem from the outside is that the Jarretts are wrestling people, both good and bad, and it always winds up that those in power want the spotlight kept on them and use their power for it. The negative is that the Carters and Dickerson haven't grown up in wrestling, and it's a very unique world, and a world that Jerry Jarrett is a survivor in. And of course, there's a lot of discussion about booking, and Dusty had heat on him, and you guys were setting Dusty up to fail, but really nobody liked Dusty, and Dutch is a you guy, and there's lots of political maneuvering here. But what I wanted to zero in on was AJ Styles for a minute. Now, we know that Monty Brown is ultimately going to leave and go to the WWE, and you will see him this weekend at StarCast, by the way, his first appearance ever at StarCast this weekend in Dallas. Check us out. But I want to ask you about AJ. It's reported here that you're against AJ winning the title. That just doesn't seem to make sense. Where is that coming from? I guess I don't believe most of this. I want you to respond to it. But who do you think is reporting? Who's the leak? Who's giving this slanted information that's being printed to Dave?
Look, that's a really tough question, but from the gift of this podcast in hearing the stories of Dave from this side of it, I don't think it was any one person. I'm sure he would hear, you name it, whether it's D'Amore or TNA, and I don't have proof at all. I'm not pointing fingers, but Dusty, I'll say Dusty Camp, just all the Dave takes as much information as possible. And then he writes, and that's why I jokingly say his fiction. He writes what he believes to be, this kind of sounds right to me, but it's number one, and rightly so, is what will get the most chatter, what will get the most buzz. That's his job, to sell subscriptions and keep people coming back. Because me not wanting AJ Styles, the one thing that I that jumped in there that didn't sound right at all is me wanting Monty Brown. And I was pretty sure we were in around this time going into contract negotiations. I didn't think that was even an option. I may be wrong on timing and all that, but at the end of the day, I don't want to discount us getting Tito, and you're not going to bring Tito in and not let him have a major role. AJ was our guy. It's the proof's in the pudding. We made him champion within, or what is it, Grand Slam champion within his first 18 months or something like that, as far as the company, or first 24 months. And then you go into, and the part about Frank Dickerson, he's a straight business guy, but he had never, and he would admit this, he had zero concept of professional wrestling. And he, I don't want to say buddied up, because that sounds maybe a little derogatory, but him and Scott D'Amore kind of from day one, and Scott comes from the wrestling world. So they kind of aligned and buddied up. And so it was obvious that Frank was sent from Dallas to Nashville to look after the investment. He had no clue. And that's where you kind of get into the layer upon layer upon layer, that it is what it is. You have a non-wrestling guy with the ultimate authority, and Frank did. Frank had ultimate authority because he was from Panda and Dallas, and that's where the money comes from. But also, that's when you kind of get this cesspool of, by committee, let's vote on it. And you know what I believe in committees in professional wrestling. It never has worked, never will work. But I think Dave had multiple leaks, to answer your question, and I think he did his best to try to piece things together. But in that scenario, he got so many things wrong.
Jeff, if you had it to do over again, and this is going to take some thinking.
Okay.
If you had it to do over again, would you have tried to co-opt the media a little bit more?
Oh, gosh. Conrad, wait, you just said it's going to take some thinking.
Well, because listen, I know,
it's my answer. I'm sorry to cut you off. It doesn't take any thinking, in that hopefully with age comes wisdom. I had no idea. This is a part of having your head down.
It was a blind spot for you.
Okay, good. That's what, because Meltzer said, somebody told me Meltzer made the only two promoters that have never subscribed to him, and I didn't do it out of, I still don't, didn't do it out of screw him, not at all. I looked at Meltzer, Keller, Mike Johnson, Bob Ryder. I hired all the internet guys through the years. I didn't discount them. I chose to say, I'm going to look at the barometers that I know that I have real tangible. At an early age, I've said this, I would read Meltzer's recap of Memphis, and he just had blatant lies, but that was in an era of phone calls. So this guy told this guy, and Dave reported shit as facts, and they weren't. But the short answer is, Conrad, we could do a whole podcast on this. Absolutely, yes. Not to get too political, I think our election this past time heavily influenced by X and TikTok and everything that goes with it. So co-opting the media is a necessity nowadays. And you look at the WWE today, you look at AEW today, you look at TNA today. We live in a different world. But me and Don Owens were the only guys that hadn't subscribed, and that was not out of. I'm sure Don didn't say, I ain't gonna subscribe to that. I just looked at. I'm going to look at the barometers to run my business on what I can actually put my hand around. That's on me, Conrad. That's on me without question.
I just wonder, if Dave hadn't come after TNA so aggressively and spilled the beans about so much infighting and backstage stuff, he paints a picture of dysfunction from day one.
Yes.
And if we're honest about it, Dave did not paint this same picture with any other wrestling promotion in history. And I just feel like if there was a misstep that ultimately led to an apathetic LOL TNA response from hardcore wrestling fans, it may have been not co-opting the media.
What's crazy is that you just reference. I'm paraphrasing. TNA was a project to make Jeff a star.
Yep.
Okay. That simple logic. That to me, that's near insanity talk, because.
But Jeff, you could have fixed it. All you had to do is pick up the phone and call him.
Oh, trust me, because the facts are, I stepped right out of the limelight once I had, in my mind, subjectively speaking, the star to replace it. Kurt Angle, off and running all this. But as the building blocks, the guy that we couldn't do these big contracts and sign guys, and we made Killings champion, we made AJ Styles champion, we made Raven champion, we made this guy champion, all this kind of stuff is. But yeah, I was the centerpiece by design on a business decision. But what you're saying is so spot on, Conrad. Just some communication, and look, when you kind of look at it, you've chuckled. Well, your dad kind of talked to Keller, but when he was really talking to Wade, I think at the very core of it, he was so damn disgruntled with the Carter relationship that also painted a negative light on TNA. Meltzer, for whatever reason, didn't want to play ball, and I'm not exactly sure all the specific reasons, but there was a TNA LOL. There was a lot. Russo, his baggage from WCW, there were some negative connotations there. It just kind of multiplied. And this was in an era when, in a lot of ways, you look at our competition or the standard bearer, this is the early days of Cena. You go back and look at their live events. They weren't setting the world on fire. It was just a completely different era. But Conrad, I'm glad you brought all that up, because yes, playing you called it co-opting the media.
Well, let me give you an example. Dave Meltzer would report, this is exactly word for word from the Observer. And I want you to think, how many times have you seen reports like this for WWE or any other promotion? Bob Ryder has virtually no power left in the company, apparently due to the heat on him for some of the contract snafus. His only real job there is handling the travel. Has virtually no power left in the company. Like a version of that story, we could change the name. Blank blank has virtually no power left in the company, comma, and it explains why. You and I know right now in current wrestling today, a handful of folks that sentence applies to, but it's never printed in the Observer.
Okay. Let me ask you this. From mid-90s to mid-2005, who's Dave Meltzer's biggest competition?
One Wrestling, Bob Ryder.
It's so transparent sitting on this side of it today.
I get it.
But you stole the. I am not pointing fingers. I'm not ragging on that. None of that. He ran and runs a business for profit. It is a for-profit business. Meltzer and Alvarez are kicking ass, taking names, making a boatload of money, and regardless of whether it's fact or fiction, that's irrelevant in their world.
How many 5-star matches do you think TNA would have had if you would have had a better relationship with Dave?
This
Kurt would have had several.
Kurt alone would have had 10.
Kurt would be regarded, if you had a better relation. And this is going to sound crazy, and people are going to get upset about this, but this is a fact, Jack. I ask anybody in wrestling. If Jeff Jarrett had a personal relationship with Dave Meltzer, Kurt Angle would be regarded as the greatest wrestler of all time. I believe that with my whole chest.
Conrad, there is no thing. If you're on the stand and defending Dave Meltzer, what is your defense?
Well, listen, I love Dave Meltzer. Let me be clear. I'm a day one subscriber. When I found out about the Observer, I became a subscriber. Love it so much. I mean, that's the reason this podcast is based on what I was led to believe my whole fandom. And that's what what I read is what I believed, because I had no doubt. I had no doubt and no reason to doubt anything that Dave said. And I still believe what he's saying now because I believe that he believes it. But I also know we're not getting the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help us God. We are occasionally not reporting things. Every reporter has to do that.
Sure.
And it's human nature. And I want to be clear. I'm not dunking on Dave here. It's human nature to try to take care of your friends.
No, that's business. It's not.
Well, but let me say this. Listen, let's just be honest. I have a pretty famous father-in-law. Occasionally, there are some negative headlines. And then people start tagging me about, oh, come get your father and all this silly shit. And it's like, and then people get upset that I don't come out and make a strong statement against my father-in-law. Well, what do you want from it? Like, that's silly. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to abstain. Like, hey, what you think is what you think, and I don't care. None of my business. So it's natural to take care of your friends and your family and your coworkers and all that. I get it. And I just think with the benefit of hindsight, if you had the information you have now, you would have co-opted the media. Just like if you had the information you have now back then, you would have bought a Tushy years ago, because you're going to realize that, man, just dry toilet paper ain't getting it done. And if you've ever been emotionally scarred from riding on public transportation, like maybe you're on a subway or a train and you can literally see a butt sweat print left on the seat from the guy who was there before, man, that'll make you start thinking about how you're taking care of the swampiest part of your body. You need to get your ass a Tushy bidet. I'm a big believer in this. Jeff has seen them. They're in every bathroom in my house, and it's been this way for a long time. The Tushy bidet that we received has changed our life. And I know that sounds silly, but guys like our gimmick attorney, Mike Dawkins, come over to visit. And when he goes home, he goes and buys one. His wife, his kids, his parents, his in-laws, they're all sort of poking fun. You're doing what now? Then they try it, and it's what everybody wanted for Christmas. Because Tushy is the everyday luxury bidet that instantly transforms your bathroom habits and your bottom health for life. There's a bidet for every biohacking personality type, like Cloud Plus, which automatically deodorizes the air when you sit down. And Aura will automatically open the seat when you enter the bathroom. Tushy's elevated bidet collection nurtures your bottom with instant warm water that never runs cold, a soothing heated seat, and UV sterilization for next level hygiene. By the way, all of Tushy bidets easily attach to your existing toilet without the need for additional plumbing. So instead of wiping endlessly with toilet paper, Tushy pristinely removes 99% of bacteria while also protecting your natural skin barrier, thanks to one natural ingredient, fresh water. Installation is super simple. It only takes about 10 minutes to complete. Literally anyone can do it. But the Tushy bidet gives you 2-in-1 benefits. You're going to reduce irritation and prevent micro tears, and you're going to do it with soothing water instead of scratchy toilet paper or damaging wet wipes. And man, if you've had a plumbing catastrophe because of wet wipes, you're looking for a reason to not use that. Hey, did I mention that you even have a built-in dryer? Yeah, cleaning yourself in the bathroom can now be hands-free. It turns out people who've made the switch to Tushy use up to 80% less TP. I can just go ahead and tell you now, I do one for safety. Just make sure we got it all. No clogged toilets, no more wasting money on something that does an inferior job cleaning your body, And every Hello Tushy bidet comes with a 30-day hassle-free return and a 12-month warranty. So keep your swampiest body parts fresh and cool. For a limited time, our listeners can get 10% off their first bidet when you order using our code MYWORLD at checkout. That's 10% off your first bidet order at hellotushy.com. Just use our promo code MYWORLD. One more time, that's Hello Tushy. That's hello, TUSHY.com, and use our promo code MYWORLD. Guys, it's a game changer. Welcome to 2025. You got to get one. Hey, so let's talk a little bit about Bob Ryder. Is this true that, he had some contract snafus and he lost some confidence of the office? So travel is his lifelong real life business. Like I think most people listening to this know I do mortgages. But I want to mention, I believe, and I could be wrong, that was always his primary business and he maintained it the entire time. So if the office did lose confidence in his ability to communicate with talent or execute on contracts or negotiate or whatever it may be, hey, we know he's got travel and he's going to save us a boatload. So we'll just stick him with that. What happened contract wise for him to lose confidence if this report is even real?
So Bob's in the TNA Hall of Fame, and rightly so. So I'll lead with that. But there were, just kind of like you referenced Meltzer, it's human nature to kind of take care of your guys. Well, in talent relations, that can really get sticky. And there were times that Bob would lean into a number of different issues. This guy do an appearance. This guy, maybe if there's an oversell at the hotel, these guys would get moved to the overspill hotel or whatever it is, playing favorites, just that simple. But at the end of the day, so I'm saying Bob was not squeaky clean by any stretch and ebbed and flow. And I can attest to this. 3 different occasions, myself and Andy Barton had to go to bat for him and candidly save his job. With that being said, when we started in 2002, Bob Ryder, Jeremy Borash, those 2 guys jump off the page, obviously myself, we wore so many hats that it was part of building a business. Once you kind of get, and it happens in any startup, I don't care, AEW, amazing what we've done, or they, from the early days, 5, 6, 7 years, all in, there's all kind of chatter and this and that. Hey, we're going to do over 20,000 people. Okay, guys, that's a lot of freaking tickets being sold. That being said, every startup goes through transitions. And when you wear a bunch of different hats, sometimes it's uncomfortable, but you have to have the growth pattern to say, hey, you're going to take this hat off. And there were times Terry Taylor came in. Hey, Bob, as it relates to talent relations, you're going to really not just loop Terry in, let him handle this part of talent relations. And you are just kind of doing the administration of talent relations and the travel, and Terry's running point on contracts. So there were some things that, gosh, who's the one that comes to mind that all of a sudden we forgot about? I don't know. But anyway, it ends up they're going to leave to go to WWE. I don't know. But Bob had some slip ups, if you will, in contract timing and re-ups and all that kind of stuff. But Bob busted his ass, and he is his skill set. But again, Bob, onewrestling.com was his passion. And one of the things that jarred my mind just minutes ago, when you kind of have, Meltzer's newsletter come out every week, Bob used to come out that notes from Bob, and he would put in there by design, like, holy shit, did he say that? And Bob knew that there was some fiction in there, but he did it anyway. But before Bob did onewrestling.com, he's a travel agent. He booked cruises, he booked flights across the board. Bob's DNA was a travel guy, and maybe the best I've ever been around. And so, yes, Conrad, his duties were restricted mainly because of the growth of the company.
Let's talk about Antonio Inoki. I can't believe this is real, but there's a report in the Observer that says, while this is another thing I expect nothing to come of, there's been talk of Antonio Inoki being interested in buying this company since it would give him controlling rights to the NWA titles. Since part of Inoki still lives in the 70s, that's far more valuable to him than it is to most. Do you ever remember hearing anything or having any conversations with Inoki here in TNA?
Didn't have conversations. I heard the to use your phrase, the rumor and innuendo, and immediately in my mind went, good luck with that. Bob Carter ain't selling nothing. It wasn't up for sale, period. And that would be me hearing it, processing it, and then kicking it on and moving on with life. Bob, I knew firsthand. I brought money to Bob as another investor, and he slammed the door in their face and get the hell out. No, thank you.
We should also talk a little bit about Eurosport. It's written here in the Observer. When talking about the Eurosport deal, we talked about the horrible announcing. We were referencing the English language announcing, as the show was broadcast on Eurosport in 10 different languages with 10 different announce teams. They used French and German announcers who did not know about wrestling. The UK commentary was horrible. Apparently, because of the way the show was edited, they couldn't keep the original commentary. So they had a guy who was in the studio do the English, a sports announcer who knew nothing about wrestling, although he does do the boxing and boxing on the station. It was horrible, not knowing any of the moves and thinking Dusty Rhodes was Dusty Rhodes. But we're under the impression there were so many complaints about the English language announcing that they won't use the announcer again. Why would you have an English announcer do anything? Why wouldn't you just have Mike Tenay and Don West? They speak English.
Yes, but Conrad, and this is something that that my extensive work, and again, times have changed. Digital, the age of digital, and being able to transfer files and all that kind of stuff. But in the days of getting now you got to remember, guys, we did pay-per-view at the Asylum, and then we got on Fox Sports Net, and so we are without question still in embryo stage. We're still a baby as far as pushing out content. And when you get a Eurosport deal, it's one of those things you kind of jump for joy. I'm not saying it was a big money deal, but it was a money deal. But then you get it on air and you just assume in my naivete that the broadcasters are going to handle it with kid gloves. Hey, they're paying for this. So of course, when they dub it over, because Conrad, a Fox Sports show, it's all due to timing. And, I'll say a 48-minute show. So Tenay would do 48 minutes of commentary, but if they need 44 minutes or whatever it may be, they have, hey, let us take over the VO because we want to talk about what's coming up next hour, what's coming on next week, what's coming up tonight. They wanted to put their own spin on it. And okay, you're going to pay us. We value your opinion. It's your air, it's your network. And then Conrad, when they come out, there is war stories, horror stories of, the English is kind of a head scratcher when they already had English, but all kinds of different languages where, the worst is when you have a broadcaster that is almost commentating like it's a comedy show. And that has happened, that they don't take anything serious. And it's, can you imagine a wrestling fan tuning in and you're essentially making fun of them for watching the programming? It doesn't take long to change that channel.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about Dusty Rhodes. It's written here in the final days before the Hard Justice pay-per-view. Dusty Rhodes was removed as booker from TNA, and here's exactly what Dave said happened. Rhodes officially resigned on May 10th when he showed up for a booking meeting in Nashville and saw that Jeremy Borash, Bill Banks, and Scott D'Amore were all there, and he was told by Dixie Carter that they were going to book by committee from this point forward. According to sources close to Rhodes, they were told they were going to sit down and put together the pay-per-view show on May 15th and the subsequent tapings on the 17th. And Rhodes said the decisions for both shows had already been done. And they want to talk about what to do with the NWA title. Rhodes said there's nothing to discuss, that AJ is going over for the championship at the pay-per-view. Carter said they need to debate the pros and cons of Styles as champion and rethink the decision. I guess Dusty said something like he doesn't have a problem with booking with a committee, but he felt some of the people on the committee don't have enough product knowledge and shouldn't be there. And he wanted to be able to have a say as to who was on the committee. I guess Mike Tenay, who lives in Las Vegas at this point, was not at the meeting, but he's also supposed to be a part of this new committee. It's written that you, Jeff, are not going to be on the new committee, but you will have input. And obviously, Jeremy Borash is closely aligned with you. And it's written in the Observer here. It says all major creative decisions will also have to be approved by an executive committee, which would likely be Dixie and the new TNA CEO, Frank Dickerson. Is this the way it went down? It's going to be a committee, and we've got a cast of characters here. Bill Banks, Jeremy Borash, Scott D'Amore, Dixie Carter, Frank Dickerson, and Dusty says, I'm out. Is that the way you remember this going down?
And I know, I'm pretty sure it's in the notes, but Scott leading the committee.
He's on the committee, yes.
But the story is Frank, and I get this. I could just imagine the conversation that Bob had with Frank. Get your ass to Nashville, and I want you to run the show, and you run it the best you can. Well, Frank, not knowing a damn thing about wrestling, Scott chatted him up. They became buddies. Okay, the best thing to do is make this a democratic process. Not everybody can be wrong, or everybody, we're all going to vote on this. So let's create this committee. Dusty diplomatically said, peace out. They thought that was the best transition. We don't want to remove Dusty and replace Dusty with a Scott D'Amore, or Dusty with Jeremy Borash, or Dusty with whoever. So we'll turn this into a committee, and we'll let Scott run it. And hey, Jeff, you've got a lot on you. And I know Jill was, I think this is around the time she's being diagnosed for the second time. There was a lot going on. The pressure, I'll say this, when Bob realized that the Jarretts brought an alternative to the financing, that we were serious, that, hey, Bob, if you want some relief, we understand, we respect, we greatly appreciate how far you've brought us. But if you want out, we didn't want to, we gave you the opportunity. Well, when he let us know in uncertain terms, also think that he was kind of moving some chess pieces, because not long after this, Conrad, is when he knew that the Jerry Jarrett TNA Entertainment relationship was headed toward a finality, and they did. They bought him out and paid him every penny back when they didn't have to. But that was all kind of part of Bob. And look, hindsight's 2020, but it was all part of Bob getting Dixie in a position to run the company. And again, hindsight's 2020, but looking back on it, that's exactly, let Frank come in and do all the hard work, so to speak, to kind of realign where good cop, bad cop. But again, going back to understanding the core of this industry, the very core of it, Frank's solution of let's play nice with everybody, put a committee in place. Dusty said, peace out. Jeff, you've got all kinds of things that you need to be doing, because I still had whatever title that was, and a talent. Let's operate under this. And I said, Frank, you got it. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, Panda was the boss. I knew my old man situation was super tense. So let's just kind of push on through this. I hired Jeremy. I hired Scott. I hired Banks. I don't know who else was on this. Tenay was a part of it. I think there was ultimately 5 guys. We could probably count them. And I just said, hey, let's see where this goes. Dusty did the right thing, though, when he just said, hey, I don't have a problem, but this committee's not for me.
I want to ask you about losses here. It's written in the Observer that since the Carters have taken over financial and since September of 2002. So as a reminder, the whole shooting match starts in June of 2002. So here we are, July, August, September, just 3 months into this thing. And the Carters are going to take over. But he says between September of 2002 and now we'll call it the summer of 2005, the TNA had lost over $20 million. I just don't believe that, Jeff. Is that real? I mean, how could the math ain't mathing, even at paying to be on TV, 20 grand. I just don't see it.
And I think we've kind of done the napkin math that Hypothetically speaking, if you lost 50 grand a week, lost 50 grand a week, because let's just say, anyway, 50 grand, 100 grand is what it costs to put it on. Say we lost our, whatever number you want to use, but 50 grand a week, Conrad, is what?
2.6 million.
Yeah, okay. Double that, 5.2.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first 2 years. Going to, we're just not anywhere close to it. Never. But going back to kind of our point, I think Dave heard a slither here and a slither there and a slither here and this and that. Okay. Bob, I mean, Conrad, I have no idea why he had such a hard on, because over 20 million is complete fabrication.
It's just, I keep coming back to, why didn't you co-op the media?
Yeah. Well, on the Toby deal,
yeah.
I think he believed, not Toby, I think Dave, it just, oh, well, lesson learned, my man, lesson learned.
Well, we're going to learn some lessons from WWE, because this weekend they're running it back with Saturday night's main event and Evolution, and MyBookie has odds on every match. Gunther's a heavy favorite over Goldberg, but stranger things have happened in that ring. Rollins versus LA Knight. Well, the crowd seems to be behind Knight, but he's still a 350-point underdog. That's right, plus 350, with Seth positioned as being, I guess, the main guy for WWE. Jordan Grace from TNA is looking to shock JC Jane for the NXT title. And if you've been watching, you already know where the value is hiding. And at MyBookie, you're not just betting winners. You're betting entrances, turns, shock wins, and getting paid when you read the story right. Sign up right now with the code MYWORLD, and we'll back you on your first deposit. $100 gets you $50 extra. $200 gets you a Benjamin. What you do with it is up to you. 2 shows, 1 weekend. Bet smart, cash in, only at MyBookie. Jeff, you got to think. I know we don't talk about betting a lot here, but you got to think Goldberg is. I mean, I know that Gunther is a heavy favorite. I mean, I think I throw my money on Goldberg.
So, Connie, is there a reason why they're not calling this
Goldberg's last match? Yeah.
I think that is what is not said is more important than what is said. I'm screwing that up, but that old saying that.
So Jeff just told you, boys and girls, the value this weekend is in Goldberg. Go snatch up Goldberg with MyBookie. Be sure to use our promo code MyWorld. What an offer. What a hookup. Hey, let's talk a little bit more about an interesting backer proposition. It's written in the Observer that Jarrett has been courting a new backer, believed to be the multimillionaire who backed the disastrous Randy Savage CD. I guess Meltzer would say that your dad had been talking about this guy for a while. I think most of us are familiar with the fact that Savage put out a rap CD and he had some sort of song on there like Be a Man, Hulk or something. Lots of silly, fun stuff if you're a big Randy Savage fan. But I don't think it necessarily set the woods on fire financially. Did you meet this guy? And was he a real possible suitor for some financial support for TNA?
No doubt. Yeah. No doubt. He was a very interesting cat, so to speak. But what's
his name? Do you remember? What his name or business or anything?
Bill. But Conrad, this is where Dave's a little late, because this had been going on for. Are we in March? Or are we in what month are we in?
May and June.
Yeah. So, because the reason I'm saying is in the winter months, it was cold as hell outside.
Bill Edwards.
There you go. It was freezing outside in Nashville at the Asylum when we brought him when he came to Nashville to have the conversation, and he was ready to carry the weight. Toby, that whole deal was much different, but it was very, very. It could not have been handled more with kid gloves. Complete respect from Bill, and that's why I think, looking back on it, I think that more than anything soured my old man, because he was like, "Now wait a minute, what do you want here? Like you're bitching and moaning that you don't like this, but we're giving you a solution here, and pretty damn good diplomatic one. You don't have to get completely out. You just don't have to carry the weight anymore." And nope, boom, slam the door shut.
Oh gosh. Let's talk let's
What
talk
a
a little bit.
Al, what a journey.
It really is. It's written in the Observer too that you guys would do 3 sets of tapings, but you only paid talent for 2. And I guess a lot of the talent was then questioning how committed the Carters really were to it. I guess the theory once upon a time was, hey, if we're going to tape 3 shows, then we're going to pay you for 3 shows. And at some point that pivoted to, hey, it was 3 shows across 2 days, so we're paying your day rate. How big of an issue was this for talent? And do you address it head on, or do you let the village get restless before you address it?
This was from the day we went to Orlando and started taping 2 shows in one day, or a show and a half in one day. And am I getting paid by the day versus paid by the episode? And I understood both sides. You talk to someone from my father's generation, and look, when I broke in, many a show did I work 2 and 3 times in a single night. And so nobody in that era would say, "Now wait a minute, I'm only getting paid for my one match." It's the same type argument that wanting to get paid, but we were trying to put as much money in talent's pockets that we possibly could, because again, going back to the age old reality of TNA of being a startup, in that we couldn't offer anywhere close to full-time stand on your own big money contracts. It just wasn't in our realities. Had we done those type of decisions, I don't think TNA would exist today. I don't think it would have pulled through. So we were doing everything as you say, Conrad, at the end of the day, you guys were running a small business, and you were doing everything you could to stay in business and to create profitability, which we eventually got to when the 1 hour, then the 2 hour, and the story goes on and on. But yeah, Conrad, that would be an issue. And then again, there were certain guys that when we would go to, okay, we're going to pay by the episode, and then all of a sudden everybody's fighting to get on 2 episodes. And why wouldn't you? I would say, hey, Dallas, Frank, Bob, Janice, Dixie, why wouldn't these guys in Orlando pitch 15 different ideas for them to get on that second episode? They're there. It's their job to pitch. It's what they do. You're just kind of creating a situation that is very, very difficult. Well, okay, then the solution is don't bring as many guys. Okay, you don't bring as many guys. What happens when you have injuries that are unexpectedly and you can't tape that second episode? It's the end all. Oh, Conrad, the joys of running the wrestling business, I'll say.
One of the other concerns that we were talking about earlier is, as you're trying to get this new television deal going, as you're going to transition or try to from Fox Sports and try to get on with either WGN or Spike or something like that. When there's a discussion that there may be a forced dark period, I guess that leads to a lot of talent wondering, hey, if we're not booked, we're not getting paid, what are we going to do? And it's in the Observer that the only exceptions to this are America's Most Wanted. I guess somewhere along the way, Chris Harris and James Storm actually got contracts where they're going to get paid whether they're working or not. Is that true? And if so, why were they important enough to get locked down and other talent weren't? No disrespect to America's Most Wanted. I totally get why they were a top act. But I'm wondering, why wouldn't an AJ Styles have been in that same sort of list, if that makes sense?
Bob Ryder. I don't think I need to say any more. AJ Styles didn't have that, and you could probably look at a few others on that roster that you go, no disrespect to AMW, but these guys should have. They all should. This group of, I'll call it the originals, the guys, the day one folks.
Yes.
Let's lean into all of them, not just two of them.
Yes.
That's the kind of stuff that would frustrate me, Andy Barton, Dixie Carter, Dallas, Jerry Jarrett, that you would just go, Bob, you're really not thinking clearly on this. You are clearly playing favorites. And in reality, that's really shining a negative light on you because everybody internally knows, oh, Bob did that. So it creates a resentment. Oh, it was what it was.
Let's talk about WGN. It said that if the WGN thing were to happen, it could be for a Monday night deal at 9 p.m. Eastern. Yes, that would mean it's going to be airing at the same time Monday Night Raw is. But it says that transition could happen in June. So it could happen almost immediately. There's not going to be necessarily a delay or anything like that. We haven't spent a ton of time talking about this, but how close did the WGN deal get to becoming a reality? Like, was it a week away? Was it 2 weeks away? Was it never close? It was all just conjecture.
Never got to deal points or a deal memo or an offer letter of any of that. But with that being said, the flip side is, hey, these questions were discussed. How quick can you deliver a show next week or today? You know, we're ready. We can do this. We've got a studio. We've got talent. We're up and running. We've got video stuff that we can create, marketing materials. We can, whatever, you know, we've got at that point, what was there, 100 something Asylum episodes and a year's worth of Fox Sports. So we have a catalog and we can put together a preview show, a best of, introductory. We can get on the air today and run it for the next month, 2 months, 3 months, and then start live. We had all those kind of discussions on what we could and couldn't do, how we would do it, where we would do it, maybe the why behind we would do it. But as far as like, okay, here's the offer letter, let's go to terms, never got there.
Let's talk a little bit about Dusty Rhodes appearing on Wrestling Observer Live. This is Dave Meltzer's radio show, and it's interesting because for years and years, Dave had a real freaking hard on for Dusty Rhodes. I mean, he wouldn't write anything favorable about Dusty at all.
Now, let me ask you on that. Why wouldn't he write something favorable about Dusty? Do you think he was talking to any of Dusty's nemesis?
Have you seen that there is a Wrestler of the Year award named the Ric Flair Award, Jeff?
No, stop the presses.
Yep. And the announcer award this year is going to be called the Jim Ross Award. And they have maybe you could have an award for started a promotion just to make himself champion, and we could rename it the Jeff Jarrett Award.
Slam dunk, baby. I'm gonna get all the votes.
It's just so silly with the benefit of hindsight. But anyway, I'm mentioning this because as Dusty is appearing on that radio show, this is on May 8th. So 2 days before he walks into that booking committee and says, I don't know if this is a good fit. He mentions, he's bragging on how great David Sahadi did in producing this video for AJ Styles that's going to air on TV in advance of the pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's a big deal for him to give props for AJ. We know that he hopes that AJ becomes the world champion, and we'll talk about what really happened here momentarily. But he also mentions through the course of this interview, not just praising AJ and praising David Sahadi, but he says specifically he's looking at bringing in CM Punk. Now, CM Punk at this point is not signed to WWE. That is going to happen, but it'll happen later this summer. He has been scheduled to work some dark matches, and it's written in the Observer that Punk has a big Ring of Honor angle he wants to do. We know that's going to be where he wins the world title when people think it's his last match, and now he's going to start wearing a suit and sign his contract on the Ring of Honor world title. It was great stuff. Peak Ring of Honor, if you ask me. But I bring this up because in an alternate universe, if Punk comes to TNA in 2005, does it change anything, do you think?
You know,
because he was here before, just to be clear. He was here in tags with like Chris Hero and Spider Nate Webb and a bunch of other guys a few years before. But now that Punk has established himself, at least in the eyes of the readers of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, where he and Samoa Joe had a trilogy in 04 that people are still raving about, he becomes a real hot property in 05. So does Samoa Joe. I know you guys land Samoa Joe. It leads to the biggest pay-per-view buy rate in TNA history, Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle. But if Punk would have came in 05 as well, does it change anything?
I think it's be silly to say, oh no, because you just said the first go around with Punk, and then during this time, 3 years later, I'm just going to say the growth as a talent is undeniable. Like, and not just in the Ring of Honor or Ring of Honor sphere, whatever it may be, but just him as a talent. But also look at us as a company from the Asylum days to here. And look, I think a lot of times the momentum of Samoa Joe when we brought him in is I don't say goes under the radar. And a lot of people are like, you know, Goldberg, the timely thing, the thing that really shot him to the moon was that undefeated streak. And we were very careful with Joe about calling him undefeated. We didn't want to give the number, but he just hadn't been beaten 2 months, in 3 months, in 4 months, in 5 months, in 6 months. Booking a guy like that, to me, that's one of the things that TNA's best creative things that we ever did was, and I don't want to say protecting Joe because a lot of people phrase it that way. I'm going to say pushing Joe. I think we hit on a lot of cylinders, and Joe's at the very top of the list in that when he would go out, although he may beat a guy with the muscle buster in his finish 1, 2, 3, at the end of the day, the guy that Joe just beat would be better off than when he went into the ring with Joe. I think Punk at this stage of his career would have made a difference in our roster in a multitude of ways. He can talk better than Joe. It would have been a part of the timing. So yeah, Conrad, I could probably be rambling on, but the what ifs, yeah, he would have made a difference. I'll say this. I think he would have made a big difference.
It is interesting to think, that he was here already at that point. And of course, every young wrestler's dream is to main event WrestleMania and that sort of thing. So I get why he ultimately decided to pursue that. But I also find it fascinating that even back in 05, Dusty saw something in CM Punk.
Yeah. Well, you know. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I've said it on here a multitude of times. I know, well, we talked about me not dialing into Meltzer. Another thing, I was so laser focused on the crew that I had and the budget that I had, and really, really laser focused on, all right, the Carters or Dallas, this budget, and I'm dealing with Spike, and I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I think are really one of the greatest storytellers of all time, Bryan Danielson. I missed. I've said that, and that was due to me just being laser focused on what was in front of me and what I had. That's another blind spot, I guess you could say, Connie.
I want to ask you a little bit about this Dusty project that I'd never heard of, and I was reading the Observer back here in 05, but I guess I just didn't remember this line at all. Rhodes is also trying to sell a movie and a television sitcom. The sitcom idea is for a show called Dusty's Place, where Dusty would play a retired ex-wrestler who owns a bar like Cheers. And the movie would be a combination horror movie and Friday Night Lights about a Texas town which is football crazy, but there's a madman stalking people in the town. Do you know if any sizzle reels or pilots or anything were shot for any of this? Because I would love to see that.
No, not to my knowledge. But Dusty's creative types, that he just kind of can go off. I mean, Dusty always was thinking. As much as I was around him and chatting with him, he always had, and my dad always had like, hey man, what if we did it, just like big, bold ideas. So I don't know how real that got is my point.
We're finally here. We're ready to talk about the pay-per-view. I, for one, am looking forward to talking about Hard Justice. But if you want a hard justice, let me tell you, you can enter the room dick first, because Blue Chew isn't just a tablet. It's a cheat code for your crotch. Stronger, harder, longer lasting. Like someone gave your downstairs a pep talk and a gym membership. Blue Chew is the original brand offering chewable tablets for better sex. Add some mass to the main mass. I popped a Blue Chew and now TSA calls me sir before every pat down. That's real. Guys, this isn't about performance. This is about your legacy or your third leg, C. Give her group chat something to talk about. Nothing makes you more of a legend than a little Blue Chew. Discover your options at bluechew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. As always, get your first month of Blue Chew free. Just use our promo code MYWORLD here at checkout. Pay the $5 shipping. That's it. Join Blue Chew's mission to upgrade humanity one thrust at a time. Head right now to bluechew.com for details and important safety information. And a big thanks to Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. And Jeff Sweener. Hey, Jeff, are you laughing? Oh, he's chewing. All right, we're interrupting Jeff's breakfast. Let's talk about some wrestling here. Hey, the pay-per-view went down on May 15th at Hard Justice. Of course, this is in Orlando. And in years past, they have been turning hundreds of way live and in person at Universal Studios for these pay-per-views. This time, again, it's a free show. And you've got the second most popular wrestler in the company, that being AJ Styles, challenging the hated villain Jeff Jarrett for the NWA title, but they turn no one away. Meltzer would say they did manage to get about 750 fans in at the start, but as usual, many left after Chris Daniels' match. And those who were there weren't as hot as usual, and there were lots of empty seats for the title change. Now, I mentioned AJ as being the second most popular performer in the promotion. Christopher Daniels is number one. You and I are big CD fans. We know he just had his last match, I don't know, 6 months ago, I guess, with AEW. Why do you think Orlando fans were so in on Christopher Daniels? I mean, you and I know what a great talent he is. But what was it about Christopher Daniels that had that Orlando connection with that crowd?
I think the very simplistic would be when you have a roster, and let's just say 30, 20, whatever, let's say 30, 15 heels, 15 babyfaces, just to use round numbers. No matter what side of the ledger Chris is on, heel or babyface, you're going to shoot TV, whether it's 3 episodes in 2 days, 1 episode, 4 days of gang tape, whatever it is, you can almost go, okay, I'm going to get Chris in there at least, depending whatever it may, he's going to give you a good to great match, no matter who put it in. So I would say in the first 3 or 4 years that we were in Orlando, Chris probably had more ring time because you could give a guy like Chris minutes. They didn't have to be short matches by any stretch. You would give a guy like Chris plenty of time. So I would say that he had more ring time, and it goes without saying, we always pushed him, but not to the moon. So he would take a loss here and there. He would, ebb and flow, which really, to me, generates a connection, because if a guy always loses or always wins, it can kind of be somewhat divisive. So I think all those factors, Conrad, really made the Orlando, specifically the faithful. And in that studio setting, you take the hardcore, the guys in the pit, the guys and gals in the pit that were basically at every taping, and the diehards that really, and they were the unsung heroes in so many ways that they were real magic sauce, so to speak, but they gave Chris love, and rightly so.
I do want to ask you about Christopher Daniels, because if you know, and just this is hard for people to wrap their head around now, but in 2005, there is no social media. So you can't go check your Instagram. You can't go see what's trending on Twitter. You can't even look at Google Trends. So you don't really have the hard data. At this point, you're not really doing house shows. So I think all you've really got to go on is crowd reaction, pay-per-view buys, television ratings, and merch sales. Are those the only metrics you can use?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, hard metrics. Yeah.
So if you know that your hardcore fan base that's there week in, week out, they love Christopher Daniels, why wouldn't you just make him champion? Why wouldn't you put him on last? Why wouldn't he be the featured guy?
I think the very simple deal was we chose to go with AJ. The dynamic. Go ahead. I think.
But I'm not arguing that you may have. I love Christopher Daniels, but I do acknowledge that he has a different style than AJ, and I also acknowledge respectfully there is an age difference between the two. But it just feels like, hey man, if you know this crowd is white hot for a guy, and like when his match is over in the middle of the show, a lot of fans leave. They came to see him and him specifically. It seems like it would be a no-brainer to at least put him in the match. Why is he not challenging you for the title here?
So first, I'm not buying the people left. That's
okay.
That's a Meltzer dig at Jeff. Not at AJ, not at Tito. I'm not buying they left.
Okay, that's fair.
I also know in the Orlando era, in the early days, what I'm saying is that they were super stringent on X amount of park guests being allowed in. And so there can be, let's just say, 15 park guests that showed up and stood in line. Little Johnny wanted to see wrestling. Mom and dad got in there. They cooled off for an hour and they go, little Sally wants to go ride a ride. Okay, then that party of 8, 10 gets up, and then Meltzer goes, oh, people were leaving during the match. No, they weren't. We filled them right in with people standing out loud. I just think that was all good day fiction writing, honestly.
What can you tell us about AJ Styles here? It's insinuated that his contract, I guess, expired in September of the prior year, September of 2004. And, in all the prior reporting prior to the actual pay-per-view review, Dave had said that you were not an advocate of losing to AJ Styles. And that's where he finished it. He doesn't want to drop the belt to AJ, period. We get the context on the pay-per-view review that says he's been working without a contract for 8 months, and you begrudgingly agreed to put him over once he signed a contract. And just the way that whole thing is framed is like, Dave, did you want him to drop the belt when he didn't have a contract to work here? How much sense would that make? I just think it's interesting that Dave found that as a way to sort of needle you without giving all the information. Like, if he doesn't have a contract, of course we're not going to put the belt on him and make him the champion. That's silly. Is that all there was? Or did you think storyline wise, or as a rule of thumb in wrestling, when you're trying to maximize your draw, whatever it may be, was there another reason, or is it simple, cut and dry? He's not signed, Conrad. I can't put the belt on him and him leave and go to Raw the next week.
So, Connie, we can probably go back in time. This will get on a Sunday morning, my juices flowing, because at the end of the day, and look, God, by the grace of God, this podcast, it doesn't give me complete clarity, but more and more and more. But the very simple business that I could look Frank Dickerson in the eye and say, Frank, why in the world would we give not just AJ, but any talent an opportunity to become champion and then go be on Raw the next day? Does that make any business sense? With that being said, Dave wanted to continue his narrative on and on and on. But remove all of that, Conrad, and my philosophy, because I've seen it work over and over and over, not just with my creative, but with all of creative across the board. At the end of the day, how big of a star would Stone Cold Steve Austin have been without Vince McMahon? How big of a star during that frame of Goldberg getting meteoric hot and Lex Luger going from the narcissist and the All-American guy that kind of fell on his fat to come in WCW, get red hot, staying red hot without the heels of Hall, Nash, and Hogan? I mean, we could go on and on and on, go back in time in every territory, in every legendary feud, over and over and over. The real magic, but more importantly, the real money is in when the heel has heat. End of story. Prove me wrong, boys. Prove me wrong. That is a philosophical belief that I have. And I always, every time I dropped the title, I wanted the most amount of heel heat. And people, oh, he had changed channel heat. Oh, okay. It just, come on. But Conrad, so I think all the layers, the contract being number one, the timing, Dickerson understanding. Dickerson has to get in here and he has to validate why Bob Carter is paying this high salary to him. He's got to make changes. I'm sure there was a little flavor of all of it, but at the end of the day, the time with bringing Tito in, you can't just bring in the hottest or one of the hottest UFC guys and not let him have impact. Just there were multiple decisions, but the contract is at the very top of them.
It's interesting to think about, how all of this gets twisted around. Of course, the biggest story coming out of this is Tito Ortiz. He's going to get high marks from everyone in TNA with the feeling that with his demeanor and look and charisma, he could be a natural for pro wrestling. Listen, you've worked with a lot of MMA fighters in this era, Frank Trigg and others. How would you classify Tito? Like in an alternate universe, I did think as an early UFC fan, hey, this guy feels like a pro wrestling type promoter or attraction. Like the way he positioned his fights and talked his fights up, it did feel like he had a little wrestling in him. Did you see that as well?
Oh shit, Conrad. And I can remember one of the early conversations because I watched my chiropractor, Dr. Tim, who we've had on here. There were a couple of buddies during this era that I'd come off the road that were really getting into UFC. They loved Tito. But one of the first questions I asked Tito, I said, "Hey man, let me ask you a question. When you're doing your interviews and hyping things up, do you have anybody like producing you or direction?" No. And so Conrad, his natural charisma, you can't teach it, you can't coach it. It is just innately. I think he had the ability to be the biggest crossover, and I don't consider Brock because I think Brock was wrestling, then MMA, then came back. So I'm saying a guy who made his name in MMA, I think he could have been the biggest crossover had he chose that direction because of his charisma alone. Because his charisma, to my knowledge, was never produced. And I just think, that's one of the things that I think in today's environment, Conrad, that there is such a blowback on the writers and this, go out there and say what you want to say. The reality is, Conrad, that's a myth. I have seen my old man when I was in high school pull talent into a room and say, "These are the points I want you to hit. And I want you to do, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. That's being produced. Now, is it writing it word for word? I get all that. But the myth that the generation of the 60s or 70s or 80s weren't produced, that's a crock of shit. It's false. It's not true. So every talent, to me, to take it to another level, I don't care if you're The Rock or Stone Cold or Cena or any modern day, if you're not produced, you're completely missing the boat because you can't produce yourselves, period. Oh, Jeff, you produce yourself. Bullshit. Dutch Mantel, at the end of the day, and Vince Russo, they produce me. Did I have ultimate authority? Yes. But at the end of the day, you've got to you got to have that, that coach, that mentor, whatever it may be. And Tito had the ability to go to the moon because he had that ball of clay of being a natural born, charismatic, arrogant, over the top badass. And that draws money.
I do want to ask you about Jeff Hardy. It's written here that he no-showed, and the Observer would say he canceled and reserved a flight from North Carolina to Orlando either 6 or 8 times over the weekend, pushing the departure time back each time, before finally not getting there at all. He did arrive after the show ended, and he was at the hotel hanging out with fans at midnight with his body completely painted up like he was ready for a match. 2 days later at the TV tapings, it comes out that he was suspended. It's written in the Observer that Jeff was very apologetic, but he didn't do himself any favors when he said the reason he kept canceling his flight was because he was running errands. And there's been considerable heat on Jeff Jarrett for refusing to fire Jeff Hardy because the two were close after he had arrived late many times. and once without even calling, and then blew off a TV taping. So we know, with the benefit of hindsight, what's going on with Jeff here. But even back then, you were a big advocate and an ally. What do you remember about Jeff pushing his flights back and then showing up after the show had finished, and ultimately you guys having to suspend him?
If my memory serves me correctly, this pay-per-view is on a Sunday. I believe I did Mexico this actual weekend going into this show. Got a black eye. I just remember it was a crazy weekend, and dealing with AJ's great, and we'd worked together a lot. And by this stage of our relationship, he probably laid out a lot of it, or a good bit of it, and we talked and kind of worked through things. We were comfortable with each other, but getting Tito into the mix and kind of having that understanding and where he's going to be best utilized and all that kind of stuff. But I could just remember, and I guess it was the next day, or maybe it was late that night. I had late nights during those times, and I'm like, you mean Jeff was painted up at the hotel? Which means he landed and got painted and then still didn't head to the building. I don't know. Everything, I was just like, damn. He was going through, obviously I had no idea about the disease of addiction, but he was going through a crazy rough time. One of the notes as you were reading, how in the hell does somebody know he delayed his flight 6 or 7 times? I just, come on. Did Bob Ryder report that? did who reported that Jeff pushed his flight back 6 or 7 times? That, I just don't see, I don't see Hardy reporting that. But anyway, it's kind of a chuckle, a theme of our pod today. But bless his heart. And I did. I took some slack. I took some slack from Panda. I took some slack from a lot of folks about me trying to really work with Jeff and have patience and try to get him on the right track. And that's back to what we said earlier. It's in everyone's human nature to try to take care of their friends. And Jeff has always been my friend.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask, because I do think, as a business owner, sometimes you have to make business decisions. And I know that's not always popular. I know a lot of times the hive mentality makes people want to think that they need to look out for the individuals and blah, blah, blah. And I get all that. But I am saying sometimes as a business owner, we've seen a lot of wrestling promoters say, hey man, as long as he's here and he's doing his job, I don't care what's going on in his personal life. So that's really what I wanted to get to you is, and you sort of put a button on it at the end when you said it was real life friend. But I wanted to ask, knowing where you are now in your life and your walk with sobriety and all of your recovery, I don't think you were in the same headspace 20 years ago, to say the least. But you clearly had a sympathetic, you were more sympathetic to Jeff than anybody else in TNA. And I wondered, was that based on old school wrestling promoter of, hey, the guy's a big star, he's a big draw, and if we can get him and we can use him to make money, we're still trying to dig out a profit here. We got to find a way to make use of what we can afford and what we got, and I have a relationship here? Or is it more based on, hey, he's my friend and I'm going to advocate for my friend? Is that always number one the entire time with you and Jeff? Or do you occasionally, if you're honest with yourself, say, I was doing some business there?
That is a really good how you frame the question, because I don't think it's either or.
Right.
I do think there's both, but for those that don't know, I met Jeff in 93 or 4 when Scott Hall was calling him Ice. Vanilla Ice was real hot during that time. And Matt and Jeff were coming in to WWF as enhancement talent. Back then we actually still did call them job boys. But Jeff had a crazy unique charisma from the day I met him. We became buds. You understand his story. We developed a friendship, and then they came in and the Hardy Boys and all that, just that relationship. And then, early in TNA, I reach out to him. So Conrad, I would have to say probably 1 would be friendship, 2 would be business, but I don't want to say maybe it's 1A and 1B, because I'd be lying if I didn't think that, hey, I knew how hot he got at the WWE. in a business sense. You know, I've said it a couple of times. There was a time, and this is for kind of the business folks that listen into our podcast. When you understand the big machine of WWE, and when they go out to these live events, and when you have one talent who has more SKUs or more product at the merchandise stands than everything else combined, you go, this boy can move some merchandise. And he moved a boatload of merchandise for TNA. So, Conrad, it goes without saying, yes, there's business involved, but I'd have to say out of the 1A and 1B, the 1A was the friendship.
Well, let's talk about another 1A, and that's saving money. I want you to take a look at this new analysis from Redfin based on MLS data. This is the gap between the listing price and the sales price. What that means is you can get a really good deal on a house right now. And all the experts seem to agree that interest rates are going to improve over the next 3 years. And when that happens, I'm telling you, it is going to feel like the pandemic all over again. There will be lots of houses selling very quickly. There will be multiple offers. People will be making offers over list price. That was a regular part of our life like 4 years ago. And I'm not saying that that's happening right now. I'm saying the opposite is happening right now. There is an opportunity for you to buy a house for less than what you've been paying in rent. And that really is the key to wealth, at least in my mind here in America. I don't know a lot of independently wealthy or millionaires who rent. A lot of people, most millionaires, most financially secure people have real estate as a key part of their portfolio. I know it is for Jeff and myself. And if you've been throwing away all of your hard-earned cash, paying someone else's mortgage, paying for someone else's home, it's time you get something on your own. We just helped Jacob do that. He's a brown bed technician right there in Bull Gap, Tennessee. We hooked him up. He's no longer paying rent. Now he owns some property. And we'd love to help you the same way we helped Jacob. Go right now to savewithconrad.com. Let a member of my team run the numbers for you and get you pre-approved. Let's get you out of that apartment and get you into some space that you can call your own. That's the real American dream. There's no cost. There's no obligation. And if we can't help you, we don't say no. We say not yet, but here's how. We're going to get you a plan. That's what you need. And we're going to plan for the future because of our 3-year guarantee. You see, as we said, experts tend to agree that interest rates are going to improve in the next few years. But we don't want you to miss out on that. So you're going to get a great deal on a house right now because it is very much a buyer's market. You can buy stuff below value. But when rates improve, we'll refinance you and get you an even lower rate. That's going to lower your payment even more. Now, what we'll do with that second refinance or that second home loan we do for you is we're not going to charge you a second set of closing costs. So you're going to lock in the best deal you can for your family right now and get a great deal on a house that you finally own. And you're going to do it with cheaper monthly payments than you're paying in rent. But man, when the rates go down, your payment's going to be even less. Or maybe you could use some of that newfound equity in your house when the market turns around, take care of some of your other bills, upgrade your house. Maybe you find the perfect house, but man, I just wish it had a detached shop out back. Well, maybe you could do that in a few years. SaveWithConrad.com can hook you up. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket. But if you're looking to buy a house, or maybe you've got credit card debt and you're struggling to make your minimum payments, or maybe you do have some projects around the house and you'd like to use some of your equity to turn your house into your dream home with no money out of pocket, we can help at SaveWithConrad.com. NMLS number 2129, equal housing lender, SaveWithConrad.com. And you can email me directly, by the way, at Conrad@SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, so let's talk about another issue before the pay-per-view. It's Diamond Dallas Page. I guess he was booked to get beat by Monty Brown's Pounce. This is a tag match he's going to be in here with Monty Brown teaming with the Outlaw when they're going to wrestle DDP and Ron Killings. DDP allegedly, according to the Observer, refused to do the job. And I guess it comes down to Terry Taylor and Scott D'Amore, according to the Observer, negotiating where DDP gets to hit his diamond cutter on everybody in the ring before getting hit with a pounce and doing the job. But it's written in the Observer that this probably soured everyone on Page, who already had heat, because prior to the show, he had scripted out a 6-man tag, and Jarrett and the rest of the guys in the match didn't want to follow his script, and he clearly didn't appear to be happy about it. Page, who missed the last set of tapings because of conflicts with a movie he was filming, was again not used on the May 17th tapings, nor is he booked for the next pay-per-view. And at this point, there are no plans for him either. What do you remember about what really happened here with DDP in May of 2005.
Doing this episode, I think it's a few different layers. Him and Dusty, it goes without saying.
Yes.
Very, very, very tight through the years. So Dusty basically tapping out. Don't know how. Look, this is all me just kind of looking back on hindsight. The committee coming in and the guys that you name, Killings, DDP, the Outlaw is Billy Gunn and
Right.
Monty Brown. So out of those four, who's the new talent? Okay. Going to get the win. Who would mean the most for Monty to get the win on? It would be DDP. So I think that's just kind of at face value what it is. And Dallas knowing probably, hey man, this isn't really what I signed up for to be in a tag and this and that. And I'm not really full-time. I probably didn't want a full-time contract. We're not offering full-time contracts. He probably like, hey, I'm going to protect my character. Let's figure everything else out except me getting beat. And business heads prevailed. He got over. He gave everybody the cutter. He won. Monty won. The show won.
The end of DDP and TNA here. We don't see him back. Hurt feelings when he left, do you think?
I don't, not on our side. And look, the single that I had with him, I still remember it fondly. And again, I've said this, Chicago Center United, me and him, I'd heard the stories about, called him a stylist and him writing matches out and this and that. And it goes without saying, Candido passion. When guys have a passion for the business, maybe it's part of my coachable, teachable team sport mentality. You may not like a guy off the court for whatever reason. I would never got into that headspace, but a guy who comes and shows up and literally busts his ass and gives an effort, how do you not like that? So I always had very high respect for the guy who said, I'm here and I'm here to work. And guess what? I don't mind telling you, I'm probably going to outwork you. I'm going to put in more effort than anybody here. And Dallas had that mentality, and so I respected it.
Let's move on. Let's talk about the pay-per-view. We had a pre-show match with Shark Boy pinning David Young in 6 minutes and 28 seconds. Man, you want to talk about two early TNA guys. I love David Young and his spine buster. And Shark Boy, it feels like he was made for TNA, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, you know what? A guy like Shark Boy, and I'm just saying, timing is everything, because
yes,
we'll call it the Shark Boy Prime. I mean, he was used on AEW on Shark Week, but you think about an attitude, my bad, a WC like that. Good old Dean, man. It's just such a likable character that's timeless. It just is. So yeah, I've always been a big fan. And when he did the Stone Cold impersonation and Shark Boy started talking, and
if that popped off during the social media era, he would have been a huge star.
There you go. Shell yeah. I mean, it was so easy to just, oh man, meme after meme after meme. Yeah, good old.
He would be in the era of pro wrestling tees and all these action figures that are popping up out of the woodwork. Like, he would have just dominated.
Can you imagine the tag team of Danhausen and Shark Boy?
I was thinking the same thing, but I didn't know if we were allowed to say his name out loud anymore. I'm just fucking being serious. I mean, shit, fire.
Oh, Lordy, what world are we living in?
Well, hell, we're trying to mind our P's and Q's, getting ready for big all-in weekend.
It was just a thought. I'm sorry.
Petey Williams and Eric Young are going to be here and defeat Apollo and Sonny Siaki. Originally, this was going to be a 6-man, but they never could get the Mexican talent they wanted on such short notice. So, well, this is what we got. Star and a quarter. I think one of the bigger takeaways is Apollo was such a mega star in Puerto Rico. That didn't really translate ever here in America. Why do you think that is?
The Rock had America. Puerto Rico had their version, Hispanic version. And I think at the very core of it, the language barrier killed Apollo. He could not speak an English promo like he could do a Spanish promo. It didn't translate.
We've talked about him a lot recently. Michael Shane out next has a great performance, teaming with Trinity to take on Chris Sabin and Tracy. I think we all know how talented Chris Sabin is. If you watch this one back, you'll think, man, why didn't Michael Shane hang with it? Timing's everything. A little later, man, he would have popped off too. We've got Raven working with Sean Waltman in a Clockwork Orange House of Fun match in 13 minutes and 2 seconds. And ahead of time, Raven totally buried Hardy in his interview, calling him a coward, saying he had no guts. And Waltman did a hell of a job here, according to Dave Meltzer, as Raven had laid out the complete match for Hardy. So Waltman was just here as the stand-in. What do you think of the job they did? I mean, this is one of the highest rated matches on the show. There's blood, there's weapons.
Pros pro. They both can go. They both work. You know, Raven is known for his House of Clockwork Orange and, you know, all I'll call the ECW, that, you know, Raven's flight, that persona. But there was a different time and a different era when there was Scotty the Body, and then there was Johnny Polo. You know, I would say Scott can work. He can wrestle, if you will. And you go from the 1, 2, 3, the Lightning Kid era to the 1, 2, 3 Kid to Six to X-Pac. Sean is multidimensional as well. So when you put two pros in there, I kind of think, what else would anybody else suspect except a really good match?
What's interesting to me, I appreciate you heaping the praise on Raven. I'm a Raven fan, but Sean Waltman and in a bloody brawl like this is not something you normally see. Like he's known for a different type of wrestling, but he does show you his range as a performer. I think Dave actually rated that about as high as anybody could have ever expected. I mean, historically, Raven was not getting a lot of high marks in the Observer, but this one gets 4.25 stars.
How about that?
He thought it was the best match on the pay-per-view, I think. Next up, we have something that I don't think's ever happened before. We've already referenced it. Monty Brown is going to be teaming with the Outlaw. We know him as Billy Gunn, but in real life, his name is Monty. So you've got Monty Brown teaming. I mean, this is hilarious. Monty the Outlaw is it's funny to me. I don't know why. They beat DDP and Ron Killings in 8 minutes and 56 seconds. We also see Andy Douglas and Chase Stevens retain their NWA tag titles over Chris Harris and James Storm. But this is really cool. We had a pre-show interview with Jimmy Hart talking to the Naturals. Of course, the Naturals have been heels, but they're saying that they want to win this one for Candido. And of course, everybody is talking about Candido and his untimely demise. But during the course of the match, they're actually going to start doing some Candido hijinks. And even when they win the match, it's when his feet are on the rope, which is the exact same way that Candido would help them win the titles originally. And the crowd's chanting Candido. The fans give the Naturals, a heel team, a standing ovation. And they even have a chair there with the white towel that we had seen when Candido was their manager, draped across the top of the chair. It was really a nice tribute. Now, 20 years ago, that felt like a little bit of a controversy in the newsletters. It's written that Bob Ryder felt like you were exploiting someone's death. I view this totally different 20 years later. This is about as nice of a tribute as you can give for a wrestler in the middle of a wrestling pay-per-view with story and all that. Like, obviously, it's not a funeral service, but as far as a celebration and a tip of the cap, I thought it was very respectful and cool. What did you think of what you guys did?
And look, there are certain times that when you have to make decisions, and only in the last couple of years would I call them highly political, and I'm not talking about parties. I'm talking about it's just it is a lightning rod. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. There is multiple instances through the years of certain things that go down on a show that you cannot make 100% right decision, 100% wrong. And this is one of those. And, you know, you gotta really think through Bob Ryder, who is paid by the organization to openly blast it. And again, kind of going back to that's just kind of a damn shame, because he voiced his opinion, but it's also, in a lot of ways, if he truly, I think if It was about Bob. It wasn't about Bob. Made it a point to make his opinion about himself as opposed to Chris, when all we were trying to do in reality is a super unfortunate situation. I mean, a real tragedy. A young guy like Chris break his leg, come back to work a few days later, fly home, pass away, and damn. So Bob knew, and Bob was close with Andy and Chase. So he knew them personally, and it's not like they made any extra money or did this out of malice or did any of that. That's why just the reality is, and I respect everybody having an opinion, but Bob made it about him as opposed to Chris.
Let's talk about Christopher Daniels. He's going to beat Shocker in 12 minutes here to keep the X Division title. Fans are really with it. It gets 3.25 stars. Shocker, is he one of the big what ifs in American wrestling history, do you think?
Yeah, and you know what? I'm just sitting here thinking about going back to the Waltman and Raven match, in that, you know, just in professional wrestling, but also in life, in business deals, under promise and over deliver. Like, we promised Hardy, didn't get Hardy, but holy shit, we got a surprise, and it's a big box office, a star and attraction, and it went up, busted the ass, and even Dave got behind it. Well, you get in here to Shocker, who came in with all that fanfare and battling his own demons. And yes, I do believe that, you know, Shocker was by far his worst enemy, and he's a gigantic, just what if things would have gone a little different for the guy? Because you go back and look at him in Mexico, damn, for his era, one of the biggest stars, just mega star.
We got a 20-man gauntlet match here to become a top contender for the title. Abyss is going to win. Maybe the most fun elimination is the very first one, when Zach Gowen is eliminated after he gets bitten in the butt by Shark Boy and thrown out. I don't know why it tickles me, but it still does. So Abyss gets the win here. 3 stars. Who helped put together these sort of gauntlet matches like this in TNA? We know famously in the WWF it was Pat Patterson. I think when the women do it in WWE now, it's Tyson Kidd / TJ Wilson, whatever you want to call him. I know that Tony Khan is pretty hands-on in AEW, and I think Bill Behrens did it in Wildside. Was there anybody on your organization who had a knack for putting together a gauntlet style match like this?
I'm not saying I had a knack, but I did them in the early years, and I found out real quick, you got so much, there's a lot of babysitting, but there's also, hey, let's sit down, Abyss, and we would do it, sit down and maybe say, hey, these are the highlights I'd like to see. Now go put it together. Because look, it kind of the proof's in the pudding. I think he's one of the best I've ever been around. Had the joy of working with, hate to say that, the old Joe Burrow lover, but Chris Park has a real good sense of taking care of everybody. And he was that guy. He just kind of transformed into that and would think it through. And again, he had that vision. And to me, somebody, Rumble, Gauntlet, whatever you want to call it, you got to have that vision to really think through the timing and the cadence of all entrances. But most importantly, once you're done, you've got to have that roller coaster, and then you got to put them on another roller coaster to really get the right outcome, no matter what it is or whoever's winning. And he was definitely that guy. One thing, Conrad, that jumped off the page too at me is you kind of look at this card, and the first one of kind of the committee, 20 guys alone were in this match, right?
Yep. Now, a lot of these are repeats from earlier in the card, though.
Yeah, but it's still a pretty stacked card.
Yeah, I'm just like Zach Gowen was new, but like Shark Boy we had already seen on the show, and Michael Shane and Chris Sabin and Apollo, and I mean, so some of these, we're doing double duty here. But let's get to our main event. AJ Styles is going to pin Jeff Jarrett to win the NWA title. Tito Ortiz is a special guest referee. They go 19 minutes and 32 seconds. As you may imagine, it's a Jeff Jarrett main event for the world title. There's some shenanigans. Jeff, anytime Dave would write about your world title matches, and although we've picked on Dave a little bit on this show today, if we're honest,
And fun.
you did a lot of Gaga in your world title main events. Is that, from the outside looking in, people would say, oh, he's got too much Memphis in him. Did you think that all the other pieces of a match, not just a match, but the drama of we're going to use the guitar, there's going to be a run in, there's going to be some interference, the referee's going to punch you, whatever it may be. How critical is that for a main event storyline? Because I feel like people often just associate it with you, but if we're honest, wasn't that also involved in almost every NWO main event as well? But that just sort of gets glossed over.
Look at Cena Punk from Saudi.
Oh yeah, of course, yes.
And I'm saying, look, in a lot of ways, my formative years, and looking, and I'm not just saying the Tennessee territory, Puerto Rico, throw that in there a little bit, and I'm not saying that Japan never has run-ins, but for the most part, it's wrestle. And I just believed at the end of the day, and again, working a weekly territory is a big part of my mentality is. And so it's not so much about the moves. It's all about the match. That's what draws the money. And so I like to incorporate other, we'll call it B and C stories, or enhancing the A story, or giving a certain talent, heel or babyface, different outs and different appendages, said, where are you going next week? You can always put that babyface over 1, 2, 3, the finality. But if you've got bits and pieces that are worked into the story, you have a direction to go next week. And that, I think that has worked for me and against me. I think, you're saying, oh, that's all he does. Well, in a lot of ways, I think that also goes along with, I'll call it the false narrative that I think Dave and others created, in that it helped their case, sold more sheets or clicks or whatever it may be, in that it's happened in every promotion through the end of time. What did we say earlier? Oh, Dusty. Oh, the Dusty finish. That Dusty finish has been done as long as I can remember, but Dusty got kind of pigeonholed and put that cap on him. There's all kinds of things. You listen to a Pat Patterson sit down and him go through a main event, and before he has it completely, he has some different ideas. There's all kinds of, well, we could do this, and we could do this, and we could do that. You just hear all the different kind of things, because again, Pat was all about story. And I think therein lies, if there is a dividing line, and I'll wrap this on this, Conrad, I think if there is a dividing line, some guys like to lean more toward the strictly the wrestling of two guys, and others like to lean toward the story of the two guys. I like to lean toward the story of two guys, because I believe that's where the most revenue's made.
The main event itself is pretty fun. We mentioned all the shenanigans. We're going to see AJ get involved with Monty Brown, and we're going to see a guitar. And Tito Ortiz is going to have some sort of confrontation with Monty Brown. That gets a big buzz. In the end, Tito's going to knock you out with a right cross. You're going to sell it like you're unconscious, and here comes AJ off the top with the spinal tap. AJ, with a new contract and a raise, is your new world champion. 3 stars here. How happy were you with the match when it was all said and done?
Well, it's hard to be unhappy with an AJ match, but I thought, if you're in the arena, go back and watch that and look, if there was some, I'm not saying there is, but damn, AJ, his athleticism, I've said it many times, a guy that's super athletic can make up for missed timings or missed spots. Not saying that we had any, but he's so damn good. It's hard to not have a really good to great match with him. But I thought our finishing sequences and how it went together, and Tito's punch was spot on. the people exploded and they got a new champion, and I built the heat. They wanted to see the babyface win. I thought it clicked. I thought it delivered. I thought it was exactly what it needed. In the back of your mind, you can't help but thinking, all right, the fans got to be happy. Dallas has got to be happy. Let's row all in the same direction. And I think mission accomplished.
No doubt about it. Mission accomplished. I enjoyed the pay-per-view. I thought it was a fun pay-per-view. And that day is the day where we introduced the new booking committee. Again, this is May 15th, 2005. It's official. The head booker is going to be Scott D'Amore, and the assistants will be Mike Tenay, Dutch Mantell, Bill Banks, and Jeremy Borash. It said that Terry Taylor's not on the booking team, but he's going to have input because he's tight with D'Amore. How do you think the D'Amore-led committee fared in your eyes?
You know what? Scott is a wrestling mind, and I think he would say, oh, is he the most creative person in the world? No. But is he a good organizer, administrator, team builder? Maybe administrator is not the word, but coach. He's not afraid to roll up his sleeves and go to work. Shout out. There was Collision on last night. There was Maple Leaf on last night. Josh Alexander tore the freaking house down. Anyway, so Scott, obviously it was Frank Dickerson's right-hand man. And I got that. I understood that. And the guys in the room, JB from a production point of view, Bill Banks from a social media point of view, Mike Tenay from an announcer point of view. Who was the other one?
It's Mike Tenay, Dutch Mantell, Bill Banks, and Jeremy Borash.
Yeah, but because I can remember having the conversation of kind of, all right, what's the team? And when you kind of look at it, I think there's three parts of really putting a product out. There's got to be matchmaking, there's got to be booking, and there's got to be writing. But Dutch is kind of the creative process, and like I just said, JB production, Mike announcing, and I'll just call the storyline continuity. They checked all the boxes in a major way, and I did think the chemistry between all of them, because I don't think, look, Dutch can be cantankerous and they all can have their nuances, if you will. But I thought the team put together was a good team, and I thought that they did as good as they possibly could under the circumstances that were given.
Let's also talk a little bit about, the news coming out of this is going to be that the Panda Nashville struggle continues. And I guess that there's going to be a further divide, at least politically. But in the middle of this, I want to put a button on something, and I'm sure Silva will stitch this together in post. But Antonio Inoki, through Dave Marquez, did wind up putting together a proposal to buy the NWA. This happens after Hard Justice. And the members and the promoters in the United States, I guess, this is a group of independent organizations, as we know. These are small-time indies, no disrespect. But that's apparently the route that Inoki tried to pursue. Obviously, he's trying to get some sort of ownership rights to the NWA world title. But it's written here that he also approached you guys with a similar proposal. And I know you and I both like Dave, and I don't remember hearing much about this. But it's written in the Observer, as best I could tell, TNA had the rights to control the NWA belt by virtue of an agreement made in 2002 with the NWA board. But perhaps an ownership change in the NWA could change that. The agreement ended up being voted down by the NWA by a margin of 3 votes. I find that hilarious that we were 3 votes away from Inoki perhaps being more involved with the NWA. If that would have happened, is there a chance it would have led to a stronger international relationship with New Japan and TNA?
Trying to think where their relationship was. Inoki, New Japan, just where all that was at, and nothing jumps off the page. But, I don't say around this time, but we all knew that long-term, the NWA was not going to be the end-all be-all, but it served its purpose. It was serving its purpose. But it is kind of fun to think, Conrad, what if if he would have gained control or got made a little bit more, I don't know, 3 votes away. That's an interesting tidbit. Either I don't recall it or never knew it. But that'd been interesting. Can you imagine Bob Carter and Antonio Inoki sitting down and trying to figure out how to do business together? I'm all for it. I'd like to have seen that.
I just think it's an interesting what if, as a reminder, I mean, you knew it. 2005 is the year when Inoki sold his stock to Ukes. So the timeline winds up, but it is interesting to think, we know that ultimately Hogan's going to be here, Flair's going to be here, but the idea that you could have had an Inoki presence on TNA, mind blowing to me.
It is. And the Hogan factor with New Japan and wow. That's good stuff, pal.
Hey, I also want to ask you about Bryan Danielson. It's in the Observer that the biggest Ring of Honor news from that same weekend where you're doing Hard Justice was Bryan Danielson leaving Ring of Honor. Dave would write, similar to Samoa Joe, he's hit a major depression point regarding the business. It's a deal where he's worked his ass off, he's gotten great, and it seemingly doesn't matter since neither WWE nor TNA have shown any interest in bringing him in. And New Japan hasn't brought him back in nearly a year. He said he's tired of working U.S. Indies, where it's based on high spots and building lots of false finishes, and he's leaving for Europe to work there all summer long and make a decision from there. Ring of Honor did an angle where he lost in Chicago to Austin Aries and made the angle that being unable to beat Aries is what's put him into a depression, and he's leaving wrestling in the United States. At this point, he's already won Wrestler of the Year in the Observer. He's pretty much a consensus top 10 wrestler in the world. Maybe his personality hasn't exactly clicked with the masses just yet, but I know you've become pretty good friends with him in recent years in your time together in AEW. I got to ask, why wasn't he on your radar in TNA in 2005?
Well, I alluded to it earlier and how glaring it is, blind spots. That may be the word that I take with me on my 6-hour drive today, Conrad. Damn gum. Why wasn't he? I'm going to say that budget constraints, knowing that we couldn't afford the talent that we currently had on the roster is the most simplistic terms is that I was laser focused on our core and then probably some guys that we use sparingly, but that's it. Blind spot. Because man, oh man, I've said it over and over and over. As far as telling stories in the ring, and yeah, Bryan can do, he can do his fair share of high flying, but that isn't what makes him great. The storytelling is what makes him great.
Well, we've got some more stuff to talk about. We're going to be talking about current stuff before we put a button on this week's show. But I did want to ask some questions here live. First of all, I have to admit, I'm not familiar with this game. Mark Fusion is with us here live in the group chat.
Yeah.
And he wants you to talk about Memphis legend Boy Tony.
Conrad, all kidding aside, you were shocked in a way that on a Sunday morning I was going to dial in here. But I'm equally, if not more shocked that you don't know who Boy Tony is.
Is that Tony Falk?
My God, Conrad, this is a Jerry Jarrett creation. Boy George was red hot.
Okay, all right.
And if you think of Boy George meets Andy Kaufman, because
I just Google imaged it. My God, how did I miss this?
Yes, and this is by old Boy Tony would give hygiene tips like Andy did used to do that about soap and toothpaste and dress up and but the
My God.
Paducah draw of Tony Falk being Boy Tony, it's kind of a Memphis classic. Mark, I appreciate the comment. Yes, legend might be pushing it a little far, but I hope that he grows. But Tony Falk will forever have a soft spot, a sweet spot in my life. He had my first match. He put up with me Still puts up to me to this day. So I love Tony. And Connie, boy toy, we're going to have an episode on Tony Falk one day to let the world know. He had James Storm's first match, Shawn Michaels' first match. There's all kind of first match. And it goes to his credit. Anybody can pull a match out of a young rookie. It's Tony.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the questions that we got here live, including Instagram a wrestling historian who says, "What'd you think of Tito's TNA return in 2013? Did you catch that? What'd you think?"
You know what? So 2013, a wrestling historian, throw it in the comments. Give me a little refresher, and maybe we'll come back to you. I always appreciate your engagement, but he came back in 2013. This is lost on me again. Once I moved out of creative in end of 2009, as far as the weekly creative, I wasn't, unless it was mine. So it doesn't ring a bell, Paul. We'll come back to you if you could kind of give me any insight.
I know Rampage Jackson was involved, if that rings a bell.
So that's the Bellator crossover?
Yes.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, that was, I'll call it more of a Bischoff, Hervey, Hogan, Spike crossover that, you know, I knew that everybody was trying to row in the right direction. I felt that the crossover never really came to fruition.
Instagram a wrestling historian. Appreciate you always throwing in and asking the good questions. Ask a Bum wants to know, this is a fun one, who would win a real fight, Jeff, Haku or Andre?
Depends on what years. When you see Andre taking slams and drop
86.
Oh, in 86?
86. Peak Haku and Andre on the downslope.
Yeah, I'm going to go Haku.
You think Haku could beat Andre in 86?
Well, yeah, Andre was having a hard time getting around.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, big time. And his alcohol diet probably
hadn't helped a lot. Yeah.
Well, I just think the reflexes might have been not have been too fast.
Matthew Rodriguez wants to know, Jeff, what was your dream network for TNA in the 2000s? Would it have been FX, TNT, TNN, something else?
No, I mean, I'll say that. I mean, look, Dream Network would be one of the big four, but that's a pipe dream. When you really look at that landscape in the golden era and getting in the Viacom family was gigantic. And in the 2000s, I truly believe, you know, the Turner networks weren't an option. They canceled in 2001. So I immediately crossed them off. If they were available, getting back on TBS, kudos to Tony and everyone who accomplished that, but the timing went right. But getting on Spike, who had wrestling, had success with it, the WWE tailwind of, hey, wrestling's on there. And I know they had ECW earlier. That was getting in that Viacom family and the budgets they had. It was a giant win. So I'm going to say Spike was the dream landing, and it really, you know, history tells that we were plowing in the right direction and bearing good fruit.
Trigger Cheese says, by the time John Cena retires, there'll be no healthy referees left. Our friend Brucey might have to put the stripes on. We just talked about a version of this a minute ago when we talked about your main event on this very pay-per-view, Jeff. Trigger wants to know, are we overdoing ref bumps in John's matches?
Well, Trigger Cheese, A, I love the name. B, I always love the engagement. C, hell no. No. Again, this may be a narrative that are dialing in to John. I'll say the heel version of John, and this may be one of his favorite kind of storytelling opportunities that he uses that. But look, everything's subjective. Everything's relative. Maybe if he does 5 months in a row of ref bumps, maybe. Again, it's subjective. So, Trigger, I'm going to say, no, we're not. But that, again, you might have a different opinion, but that's one of the things that makes the wrestling business so healthy. Everybody's got an opinion.
Everybody's going to have an opinion this weekend, too, because StarCast is here on Friday, July 11th and Saturday, July 12th. It's going down at the Sheraton in Arlington. You can get all of your panels, your meet and greets, your pro photo ops. We've even got some free stuff thrown in this year. It's something for everybody, whether you're looking for the stars of AEW or the legends and Hall of Famers. It's a who's who in professional wrestling this weekend, and we hope you'll join us. You even see the black hat there in the top right-hand corner hanging off the T in StarCast. That black hat is because, by God, Jim Ross is going to be with us. I'm so thankful that he's going to be returning to wrestling. We're going to have him there for some pro photo ops and some other panels that you couldn't see anywhere else. Legends like Dory Funk taking the stage with Kevin Von Erich and John Layfield and Stan Hansen. It's a who's who, and it's all happening at StarCast. And you can grab your bracelets right now so you don't miss out on any of the events at STARRCAST.com. And Jeff, you don't know about this, but check this out. We just locked this down last week. I can't believe I got this approved. We are going to allow one of our bracelet holders, whether you bought a gold or you bought a platinum, we're going to draw one lucky winner, and that person will have their all-in tickets upgraded to a pair of ringside floor seats. And then you'll get to go backstage and get a backstage tour. That's something that's not available for sale. It's never been sold before. You're going to be backstage at AEW's biggest stadium show ever, their biggest show in America, their biggest gate in America ever. Not only will you have a ringside seat, you get to go backstage and sit at the press conference with a primo seat. And immediately following the press conference, you get a personal meet and greet with Tony Khan. This is something you can't get anywhere else. It's not available for sale, but if you grab your bracelet, whether it's a platinum bracelet or a gold bracelet, you're automatically entered. That's all it takes. Pick up your bracelets right now. You're getting an upgraded opportunity to sit ringside on the floor for the biggest AEW show in American history, and then go backstage afterwards, see the presser, and then get a personal meet and greet with Tony Khan. Doesn't get any cooler than that. And the only way to do it is to go to StarCast.com, grab those bracelets. And, of course, what a show it's going to be. We're talking about All In Texas. We get everything kicked off on Wednesday with Dynamite. We're back again for Collision on Thursday. Friday is the, of course, all-day affair of StarCast. And then the Ring of Honor pay-per-view that night. Saturday, it's more StarCast to get your Saturday kicked off, including an incredible Lucha panel with the owner of CMLL. That's right. The owner of CMLL. Said differently, the Mexican Vince McMahon is going to be there. And I am pumped that he's going to be there with Blue Panther and so many other great stars. You don't want to miss it. It's all happening at StarCast. But immediately following the close of StarCast, we're going to walk 2 blocks away and we're going to the Texas. We're going to where the Texans play. We're talking, not the Texans, the Rangers, the Texas Rangers. I'll get it out. Globe Life Field. Tickets are on sale now for what, Jeff, you and I were talking before we clicked record, might be the most stacked card in AEW history. You've got the men's casino gauntlet match. It's already been announced that Mystico's in that, MJF's in that, and Mark Briscoe's in that. The winner will be guaranteed to get a world title shot. We've also got this same thing happening for the women's. It's a women's casino gauntlet match. The winner's going to get a title shot. You got to believe those are the stakes. And how about the actual card itself? The Young Bucks are going to be in there with Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay. This feels like a dream match. The Young Bucks always over-deliver on pay-per-view. I think by now everyone listening to this knows what Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay can do. This is going to be incredible. This could be the show stealer, and that's saying something. We've also got the tag titles up for grabs in a 3-way with the Hurt Syndicate, Jet Speed, and the Patriarchy. The TBS title match has Adam Cole and Kyle Fletcher. The women's title has Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné. And perhaps the dream match that people thought would never happen on American soil, it's the real rubber match with Kenny Omega and Okada. They're tied at 1 apiece and they have a draw. And we're going to have winner take all here as Kenny comes in with the International Championship. Okada comes in with the Continental Championship. The winner walks out the AEW Unified Champion. This is the trilogy that put New Japan on the map on pay-per-view. I can't wait for you guys to see this. I can't wait to be a part of it. And how about the main event? Jon Moxley and Adam Page, Hangman, challenging for the world title in a Texas death match. You know they're going to pull out all the stops. If I was a betting man, maybe a little blood in this one. It's going to be brutal. I don't think Moxley is going to pull any punches in this one, man. You've seen some brutality on pay-per-view with Jon Moxley, and I expect nothing less in AEW's first stadium show here in America for the world title. This might be the most stacked AEW card ever, Jeff.
Loaded is an understatement, but Conrad, it's how I've said it, and I'll say it on 0 Hour. I'm sure I've done it in some promotional stuff. Nobody does pay-per-view better than AEW, and you just said it, stacked on top of stacked on top of stacked. It all crystallized over the last 21 days, but Moxley's had the belt since October, I think. Hangman's got his sights set, and I'd like to see him do it. I got a lot of respect for that guy. So the time is here, buddy. Countdown.
Any chance we'll see you on 0 Hour?
Oh, I'll be there, pal. I will be there. Any chance we'll see you?
Well, I'll be at StarCast, and you should be too. I know that Double J is going to be there. That's STARRCAST.com. By the way, I know that AEW has their critics and tribalism is real, but I just want to put this in perspective. Jeff, they're going to have a $3 million gate at this show.
That's
right. I know that people are going to look at, oh, well, there's this or there's that and all these other compensating factors, and haters are going to say whatever haters are going to say. But what outside of WWE, what wrestling promotion in the world is going to have a $3 million gate in 2025?
A couple of months ago, I did an interview with the Orlando, and the guy asked me, what do you think about tribalism? And he led me down the deal that I was going to hate it and talk bad about it. And I just said, I absolutely love it. You got to take the good with the bad, but at the end of the day, haters are going to hate, but it is the lightning rod that our industry has become. It's no different than anything else in the world. Everything's politicized. Everybody throws rock at everybody, good, bad, or indifferent. But you just said it. A $3 million gate, over 20,000 in a stadium. In July it is, I think, arguably. Man, as far as both companies, is there a bigger weekend this year? I'm not sure. It ranks right up there. Stack card. I think you are going to see
in Texas in the middle of July on a matinee show.
Well, and look, if you're a wrestling fan at your very core, getting to witness the Omega Okada,
unbelievable.
It's I don't want to come across as hype, but arguably Okada is a top 5 in the history of Japan. You're going to see one for the ages. There's no doubt in my mind. I'll say this. I don't know I don't know the schedule, the layout of anything, but boy, oh boy, it's going to be real hard to follow Omega Okada.
Let me just say, StarCast, as we said, is going to start that morning. So the actual pre-show, I believe, is going to start at like noon. The pay-per-view starts at 2. These are local times. Those are central times. But I'm just saying all that to say, I don't know match formatting either, of course. But I'm going to find out because I want to be in the building, in the crowd for Omega Okada.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to abandon my own event if I need to in order to be in the crowd for Omega Okada because that's real wrestling history. And I think to myself, man, how cool would it have been to be on the floor or in the crowd, a lower riser, just watching Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat in 1989. And now we're going to get to see the modern version of that here in 2025. And it happens just a few days from now. Tickets are on sale. I encourage you to go grab them right now at AEWTIX.com. You won't find a bad seat here. It is a beautiful venue. They've made it super convenient. They've got lots of really cool stuff right next door. It really is walkable. If you're going to be in town at StarCast, I want to encourage you. StarCast, you may not know this, the Sheraton in Arlington is in the same parking lot as the Esports Arena. So you'll be able to walk right from StarCast to the Ring of Honor pay-per-view, and then just literally a block or two away, you'll be inside Globe Life Field. So you're like 2 blocks. So if you've done any WrestleMania weekends in New Orleans where you can kind of navigate and walk around everywhere, you're going to be able to do a lot of that this weekend. Encourage you to check it out because unfortunately, Jeff, it's been revealed that next year, All In is going back to Wembley Stadium. So this is our chance, America. Let's show up and show out, and let's have one of the best wrestling weekends of the year. It's this weekend. Tickets on sale now at AEWTIX.com. Of course, that night, we've got Saturday night's main event. LA Knight and Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton. But what everybody really wants to talk about, Gunther and Goldberg, and you're right, you gave a bit of a spoiler. They have not officially called this Goldberg's last match. Does make you believe, in theory, maybe he's going to work another show. Maybe it's a Saudi show. I don't know. But does that mean Goldberg's walking out with a big gold belt? What say you? I say Goldberg wins. What about you?
You can do that other ad read we did on MyBookie. Folks, that's the hot tip of the weekend.
There you go. No doubt. No doubt. I want to get your take on one more thing, and then we'll put a button on today's episode, Jeff. It's been a marathon, but it's been a great show. And there's some controversy surrounding this new Netflix project that's going to come out called WWE Unreal. And we've talked about this. This is where we're going to see behind the scenes of the creative process for WWE. And I think they're going to have some key moments, like as they book the Royal Rumble, or as they book someone's return, or as they book WrestleMania. So we're going to be in the room when some of those real conversations are happening. And you, when this was first announced, said, Connie, it all comes down to the edit. Well, Jake the Snake Roberts was recently on his podcast, and he categorized the Netflix series WWE Unreal as being foolish, saying that there is no amount of money that can be made from the show that will warrant the damage it will do. That's the old school mentality for sure. No arguing with a legend like Jake the Snake Roberts. He knows a thing or two about a thing or two. But Ryback, controversial legend in his own right, has a different viewpoint. And he says, I truly believe WWE Unreal is one of the best things for wrestling and wrestlers. This is physical acting, the hardest thing in the world. We play roles, and it takes all of us. No one really wins or loses. And it's time that fans and dirt sheets stop the hate and understand what this is. It's no different than movies. You're given a role, and depending on your contract, sometimes you know exactly what it is. Other times it's week to week. No one shames actors for playing a bad guy or a small part. It takes everyone. Wrestling is one giant production. What do you think of that, Jeff?
Of Ryback's comment?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I mean, he's him and Jake both are giving their opinion, and I can see all sides of it. I'll go back to my comment. I think it's all in the edit. You know, the show Succession. What do you call those after? You know, the when the credits roll and they have little bits about, and the actors are not acting anymore. They're giving real comments about scenes or story, and then the writer and the director and the creator of the show. I think it's a version of all of this, and I think in a lot of ways, it is the Hollywood version of it. My gut tells me that Ari and team are getting paid a boatload of money for everything they deliver to Netflix. I think Jake's underlying comment when he says damage may be a little strong, but I'm going to go, what's the upside? What's truly the long-term upside? Because we don't do magic, but Conrad, there is a lot of, you know, I just saw, where was I think, yesterday, Conrad, I had a big burn pile out back yesterday. So I would mess with the fire and burn and then get the law. Anyway, scrolling, I saw the guy who played Kerry Von Erich in the movie, and he kind of went through the physicality of what we do. And he was like, holy shit, that you got to act as well as do physicality, as well as remember, you got to do this and that. I do think I think it's one of the reasons that our form of entertainment has lasted so long, because not everybody can do it, and damn sure not everybody can do it good. So it is the mindset of, does this ultimately grow the product? And, you know, the David Copperfield or any magician, you know, the exposés, or how do they do the magic trick, or whatever it may be. I think from a general point of view is it's going to get ratings. How much? I don't think it's going to be gangbusters, but the ultimate upside, I'm not sure until I see an edit. I'm convinced. Without seeing the first edit, I'm going to say the long-term upside is not there. I don't see it, because people love to be entertained and kind of have that, wow, how did this all come off? And I'm into it. And, you know, I don't know, I could give a bunch of examples, but the spontaneous interaction that you have, I think this can do some damage to certain talent inadvertently. And I think that's going to be kind of a fallout, that when you hear certain, I just think there are some things hanging out there. And, you know, you go back to the generation of regional promoters, announcers don't draw money, refs don't draw money, blah, 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 blah. Well, now in this day and age, writers don't draw money. You know, we can go all, the creative room doesn't draw money. We could say all that, but Ryback's point is it all is one giant production. Folks, we know that, just like Hollywood blockbusters are, and just like Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football, it's all giant productions. But at the end of the day, let's watch the finished project and still have instead of how the cake is baked.
We're going to bake a lot of cake this coming week in Texas. I hope you'll make plans to join us. AEWTIX.com. It's going to be fun for the whole family. Join us to see a whole great week of wrestling. Again, Dynamite on Wednesday, Collision on Thursday, Starrcast and Ring of Honor on Friday, Starrcast and All In on Saturday. And then at night, maybe we'll check out Goldberg's last match. Or is it? We'll talk about it next week. The good, the bad, and the ugly right here on My World.
Peace.